Being 6:30, let me call
5:30.
at 5:30, thank you. This meeting of the select board to order. Those in attendance, Ryan,
I'm here, yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Ann is here,
And John is here.
and John is here, and Becky will join us later. The first part of the meeting is going to be an open forum where people may ask questions and give opinions and generally tell us what's going on. I'm going to ask the people, if they are willing, give their names before they begin to speak. And given the audience that we've got, I don't see any reason that I need to limit people to any particular amount of time.
We do have about 10, 12 people
We have 10 or 12 people?
on Zoom. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'll start with the people in the room. Please, go
Would you
ahead.
like me to begin?
Yes,
Okay. I'm hard of hearing, bear that in
Uh-huh.
mind. I just came from a meeting of
could you
the
give-
Open Space and
could you give
Recreation.
us your,
Give me a-
although everyone knows you,
Helen Bethel,
thank you, Helen.
sorry. I just came from a meeting with the Open Space Committee. We are working on, among other things, a project focused on the watersheds for the drinking water. And we started out with the Gordon College woods because they're so critical to the Round Pond and Gravelly Pond. And we did some digging, getting up all the information we could about the geology of the area, the soils, the topography, the whole history of Gordon College owning the land and wanting to develop it. And what we found was that in the late 20th century, 1990 something, we could give you more details if you wanted. The New England Biolabs
Mhm.
was very interested in building there. They joined with the Essex County Greenbelt in a project that was going to save all the Gordon woodlands, the ones in Hamilton which did get saved.
Mhm.
And that piece too, in Manchester. However, the price was $1 million that Biolabs was going to contribute to the effort if it could build its new headquarters on that property. And so they had a survey done, an exploration done of the pros and cons of doing that. And we got a hold of their survey. And the survey basically says no. And New England Biolabs withdrew from the project because that land was not really appropriate for a major corporation. They needed, they planned to have 2 large buildings, each 10,000 square feet, 2 stories, 20,000 square feet. One to be built right away and the other one to be built later on as they expanded. And they found that the land was just not going to support that. And so they withdrew from the project, and Greenbelt was forced to find the money elsewhere to save the Hamilton woods, which were saved. They're now administered jointly by the 2 towns, and they're in conservation. So anyway, we looked at that, and that followed on an earlier effort that had been made by Christian book distributors earlier, and then come up with the same conclusions. So our understanding is that no major corporation is ever going to want to develop that land. And so we propose to go, CONSCOM, go to the administrators of the college and discuss a conservation restriction that would prohibit smaller development in there. And if Gordon College is not interested in that, at least to give us a right of first refusal if any small developer were to come along.
Mhm.
Our thinking being that a small development in there would pose more of a risk to the water supply than it would generate revenue to the town. We have got this all in the memo that you will be receiving soon. It merely, it's held up just because the Concom didn't get around to formally adopting it. But they will be doing that. And Steve Gang asked me to come and explain this to you.
Mhm.
So you will be getting a memo and this extensive memo that explains why we feel that the land is not worth developing. It can't be developed largely. It's not worth developing smallly. But at any rate, if Gordon College is not willing to accept that reality
Mhm.
and let us acquire a conservation restriction, then at least if they would give us a right of first refusal, so we can make up our minds later when we actually know what is being proposed. It doesn't lock the town into anything. And in fact, if they were willing to give us a conservation restriction, they would want money for it. And we would work with
The Conservation Trust and,
MECT to get enough money. See, the state will pay for half because it's watershed land. The state automatically approves watershed land and it's very generous.
Mhm.
But we don't think we should have to pay Gordon College a great deal of money for land that really isn't worth much. So that's why it's all very up in the air, perceptions. We cannot make that decision by ourselves. Anyway, the thought was to give you a heads up that that's the way we're approaching it.
It's helpful, thank you.
does anyone have any questions?
I know it's hard for you to give questions when you have no material in front of you.
We'll
You
look
will
forward to getting the
shortly.
note.
Okay?
Thank you for
Thank you very much.
reporting on
Thank
that.
you.
We appreciate hearing the history of it as well.
Well, it's important.
Yes, yes.
I
Good
know.
luck getting a ride home.
And that doesn't rule out development elsewhere in the other watershed. You understand, Manchester has two very separate and distinct watersheds.
Mhm.
The one for Growling Round Pond is the most sensitive because we own very little of that watershed.
Mhm.
And this Gordon Woods is directly south of the ponds. It's so close. Whereas the other watershed, which is to the east, is bigger, larger, and the land that would be developed, say, by cell signal is nowhere near as close to the actual well as we have in this situation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You know,
Was she serious? If you need a ride home, I can drive her home. Do you need a ride home?
Pardon?
Do you need a ride home?
Oh, my husband's gonna.
Oh, okay.
Oh, good deal, thank you.
You were here next.
Yes, my name is Kim Logue and I live at 142 Summer Street, just about 100 feet from the pickleball courts. I am here to ask the board to thoughtfully consider moving the courts to Upper Pine near, I guess it's the gun club, or the water treatment plant. It's not just the constant pop, pop, pop for hours at a time. There are gaps during the day that's already been established. There, in the middle of the day, it does seem to lighten up, but it's not, I think what's going to happen is good money is gonna be thrown after bad because those panels are not going to correct the problem. There, last week I had a gentleman outside urinating right on 127. There's people out there with headlights I called the police department, they come, it was pitch black, because the hours say 8 to 8. Comes to my house to tell me they have a right to be there because it's still 8, but they're out there with headlights in the dark, yelling and screaming. I've already talked about the swearing that goes on during the day when they miss their shots. It's just constant, and it's not fair to the neighborhood. When they're, and I know that there's cost involved in it, but those fences could be repurposed, the nets could be repurposed. The money that has been set aside, which isn't a whole lot, could be put towards relocating them. And maybe the town doesn't have the money for that, I'm not sure, but maybe they could, you know, people who like to play pickleball, which is a great sport, don't get me wrong, it's just in the wrong spot. Maybe they could do a fundraising campaign to move it to a place where it's not gonna be around anyone's home. I'm sure anyone in this room, if they came and sat at my house for a couple hours during play, would not appreciate it being in their front yard. And then on top of it, there's not supposed to be tournaments. This weekend there was a tournament over there that wasn't approved, but the police came, but they allowed it to continue. It's just not fair to people that own homes over there, and the property values are probably decreased as a result of it. So I'm just here to express that once again. I've been told, well, you have the train goes by 26 times a day. It's a total different sound. The train, you hear the train for 30 seconds and it's not a sound that is bothersome at all. As well as the noise from Sweeney Park with families cheering on their children. Totally different sound. It's not 3 hours of a constant popping sound from 6 courts, not just 1 court, but 6. So if there is someplace else that it could go, I hope that the board will really consider doing that.
Thank you, thank you. Does anyone from the board, questions, comments?
I would like to just say that, is it Ballot?
Kathy Bellata.
You're suggesting even the interim to put a fob, is that what it's called?
Oh, the lock to
So that,
only allow certain
you know,
people to go in.
People from town could use it until such time that something could be corrected. I think that's a great suggestion because people are coming from all over. The courts could be filled and there'll be a line of 15 people waiting on certain days. But anyway, that's all I have to say, but I hope you will consider it.
Thank you very much. And yes, obviously, that's one of the things we have to consider. It will be on the future agenda, and we will let you know.
Okay, you'll let me know when it's on the agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Chris, did you have,
I'm here to listen.
okay. Sheila,
Well, I'm here to listen, except I had a conversation with Chris on the way up the staircase. I'm not clear what you all may know about the bidding process for the MAHT redo of Newport,
okay,
blah, blah, blah. So I've been trying to get as much correct information about that as possible. I did go to the open planning meeting, open space meeting today. Steve Gang seemed to think that there was no known bidder, that there was no known
okay.
parcel, that.
As a matter of fact, this is our next order of business
I learned that from Chris.
at 6:30.
Yeah,
And rather than speculate, perhaps we could have the people who are actually involved.
so can you
Can you-
tell me who's coming at 6:30 to,
I think John Feuerbach is the chair.
his mission is to update you on how that whole
Yes.
process is going.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I need to hear.
Okay,
So other than that, I'll just wait, and
fine.
maybe I'll wait, I don't know. Maybe I'll go
Or-
get
or-
some dinner.
Yeah, go home and
Yeah.
log in and
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
But rather than speculate,
fine,
since we have it on the
Fine.
agenda.
Fine.
Greg, who is there?
So I guess if you want to announce people from Zoom land can raise their hands.
People from Zoom land should please raise their hands. I assume, Chuck, that you don't have anything to say to us in private, in open forum.
Nope, I'm on the agenda tonight and I figured this was a good place any to just hear what's going on around town.
Okay,
Sandy has her hand up.
yes.
Okay, hello there. I have a couple general
You
comments.
are Sandy Rogers,
consider.
right?
Hello?
You are Sandy
getting sort of-
Rogers?
Is someone speaking? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there. One thing that I'd like to see more of in town is a financial planning effort and information to the citizens when we're voting at town meeting that has a longer term trajectory. Every year we're asked to make some spending decisions, and a lot of times they're in isolation. And considering where you're potentially going to have to do a lot more spending going forward on infrastructure and other big ticket things, I think we need a better view of what's coming down the pipeline. I do want to say that sort of at the nth hour, and it might have been, because I didn't attend financial meetings, but getting information about how we should be managing our funds, and there was, I think, Sarah weighed in on sort of the how we were handling the fields and how that was being financed and how that might impact things long term was just, it was helpful to get a little bit more of that view, but I think we need to go further and see 3-year, 5-year, 7, 10-year plans, because there are things that we may not want to pass immediately because we know that we're going to have to spend going forward. I think we need more of that kind of view and maybe more workshops around that before we're asked to vote on things. So that would be one thing I would like to see more of somehow. And then secondly, I do believe that it's good to be able to hear varying voices and opinions. There are some meetings that are held that seem to stifle the discussion, and other ones that get ahead of the topic with enough time where there's a good discussion that goes on and a good Q&A. One positive note was the session that was just held on the Rotunda. There was a lot of time vested just for that topic, and there was a lot of information that went back and forth and a lot of voices that were heard at that meeting. I find that that's often a rarity, and it would be good to make sure that we do that going forward, as well as in some of the boards themselves. They need to have more of those different voices heard amongst themselves. So I think, when we want to think about a democratic process, we need more of that in this town. Thanks.
On the longer term trajectory, the finance committee and Greg have been working on not just 5 and 10 year, but further ahead further looks ahead. I suggest that you, I'm sure you do, read the agendas for the finance committee. They should be working on more capital plans. Greg, do you have anything further to?
So we do have, in the Finance Committee's annual report that is available at town meeting, there is always a 5-year projection of capital.
Mhm.
And their narrative tries to address the operating,
Yeah.
lay of the land, but it's one of these areas where we can always do more, so we can take a harder look at it.
We're about to get the final facilities report, which is another thing that will impact.
Right, yeah, so certainly nailing down that facility plan will help give a lay of the land going forward in terms of what people can anticipate for larger expenses.
So I think.
Yeah, I think having that view when we're actually posed to vote on things, and it's not always gonna be a 1 + 1 + 1. It might be that, one of those items, we need to table, if we know that we're gonna have to do some more, investing. So I think having that visibility, I'm not sure everyone sees and reads everything, and getting in front of it, that's great to hear, and look forward to seeing more details.
Thank you.
So Sarah Pierce has her hand up.
Hi, yes, thank you. Sarah Pierce, 9 Friend Street. Thank you all for having this open forum, first off. And I had 2 questions. One was, are there any new updates to what's happening with the Manchester Community Center? And I can give the second question now or wait.
Yes, one of the items on, I thought it was on our agenda.
I think it's on the
The
town
MTA
report,
report?
the administrator's
It's in
report.
the administrator's report. Greg,
So, I mean, the short answer is that we are negotiating what we hope to be a long-term lease for the town to have that building and use of building, and then turning around and sharing that use with the community center. So we hope to have more definitive information on that. We will be talking later this evening about a town meeting article to allow the town to enter into such a lease.
so we're.
That's
we're-
great. Thank you, yeah.
for the
And just a
meeting
second.
On the 13th
Sorry.
of November. This is the November special town meeting.
And then just a second question back to the rotunda. I know you probably all don't want to revisit this, but looking at the rotunda personally and talking with several people, you voted on to keep the rotunda in the water, which is excellent, and to do the necessary upgrades to make it stable to use. But if you were able to get the same outcome at much less of a cost and use different materials, would you be open to having another proposal before signing on with the company or the firm that did that study?
We have a long history with that company, which has been successful.
So, I mean, I guess my personal response would be, if you have different information you want to share, we can always take a look at it and compare it, but I don't know if the town is in a position to be spending additional monies on alternatives.
No, yeah, I wouldn't ask the town to do it, just if it were additional information you'd be open to looking at.
If you
And
have
one
information-
concern, sorry?
If you have information, please share it.
Well, I don't have it yet. I wasn't gonna go out and get it unless it was something you'd be open to listening to, so I just wanted to ask if that were the case. One concern was through that firm, they say that the rotunda does need to be dismantled and in order to do the restoration or the stabilization of it, and that to me is concerning, because if you look at the actual structure, I don't see how you could put that back and have it be in its original historical shape. But I'll be happy to look into a few different areas that people have mentioned and put something together, and if you're willing to look at it, that's great.
Yeah, well, we would leave it up to the contractor in terms of sort of methods and means of construction, in terms of whether or not they take it apart or they try to lift it up with a crane and put it on land and then hoist it back into place. And that's, I think that's something we would leave for the contractor to do.
We haven't signed a contract yet,
No.
I don't think, so it's
It
just
hasn't even gone out to bid. We're still in engineering
in
phase.
engineering design.
Yep.
So,
Great, thank you very much.
Karen Bennett has her hand up.
Hey folks, Karen Bennett, 28 Lincoln Street. First of all, I want to thank you for having this open forum. I believe this is the first time we've been able to have like an open forum like this, and I think it is great that you're doing this. I personally would love to see this like once a month, where the public is allowed to come in and ask questions. I know that transparency has been one of those things that you folks have been struggling with. I think this is something that kind of puts the residents at ease that, hey, now there's a possibility you have a complaint, you have something going on, there's a place to do it. I think a lot of folks feel that we come on to some of these meetings and we can't discuss things. We're shut down, or it's not on the agenda, or whatever it is. So I, for one, am thrilled that you've done this, or whoever has done it. So thank you for doing that. That's great.
Everything we do as a board.
Great, wonderful. A couple of things that I still have issues with, and I do want to bring up, is one is, can you guys please buy some external speakers to put in front of Greg and Ann, because you're very, very hard to hear on a Zoom call. And they do have them. If you need some suggestions, please let us know. I can give them to you, but you're very hard to hear. Greg, you're easier here to hear tonight, but Ann, it's always very difficult to hear. So either yell like I do or speak louder, but that might be an alternative, but if you could. Some things that I think has stifled people to speaking up, and I don't want to dig up old wounds, but I do want to say that some of the things that kind of turn people off from saying anything is some of the things that have come out of the select board. And as of recent, I heard somebody on the select board call somebody's comment on an open public forum garbage. And the minute you say those type of things to somebody, it shuts people off and it turns the rest of the residents off. So I really wish that folks would be careful with their words when you're talking to the residents. In addition to that, as far as the zoning and everything that's been discussed, and as you folks know, I'm pretty much involved. I'm on every call. I understand what's going on. The recent zoning call where everybody, or actually it was, I think it was a task force meeting where everybody was making sure that their personal land wasn't going to be touched, but the land that was going to be touched was the general district, because it's not a single family district. So to me, that just seems like, let's throw everything into the general district, and, because of course we're not in that district. So that's how it feels. I want you to know how the residents feel, because when you talk to people, when they see those kind of things, that's the impression that they're left with. And the last question I have is, has the special town meeting been voted on yet?
No.
The date?
We have suggested the date of November 13th as being.
Okay, but I'm sorry, Ann, has it been voted on that that's the date?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have, thank you.
So Ben has his hand up.
Sorry, it's Mary Foley, 1 Pulaski Drive. Wasn't planning on speaking, but there's been so many good comments with spoken tonight from Helen, Bethel, with the Gordon College land that is very important to preserve for our water. So I think that's very important for all boards to discuss that. And to tag on to what Sandy was saying about some finance topics, I would like to add to that, before things go to town meeting, that we know, again, she was addressing the whole picture. I know there's items that get voted on at one town meeting and then the monies end up not getting spent. So if we can know those things before we vote on different monies, I think an example, just top of my head, is the harbor master. I think we voted on a floating harbor master office, and I don't think that ever came to fruition, so kind of wondering what happens with that money, where does it go, what, kind of if we can see whole pictures, whole numbers, that would, I think, help residents be better informed. And then a question about the governance project. When will this be rolled out to other boards to do similar things that the select board is doing tonight, having kind of an open forum for discussion, and then perhaps more communication between boards and committees so that the boards and committees stay informed on things. Thank you.
Okay, let me just make sure I got your comments. You agree with Helen Bethel that the Gordon College land we ought to consider what we can do to protect it, since it's important to our Gravelly Pond water source. You'd like to know what happens when monies are allocated but not spent, and I can offer a small insight into that, which is that, for example, there is a generator at Town Hall, which we've been trying to get moved, and we've just had terrible time finding the pieces to build it, and I think that money is probably 18 months old or so. It's a project that's, not every project can be done starting, nothing is necessarily shovel-ready on July 1st when the fiscal year starts. And sometimes something that looks as if it's going to be easy does take more time. We leave the money in those accounts, I believe, Greg, until such time as we decide that it's absolutely not going to be done.
So for capital,
Yes.
monies can stay there. Recently, the Finance Committee has suggested that that be done for a maximum of 2 years, and then we get an update. But any monies that are not spent eventually, that all will then roll back to the general fund.
Yes.
So if it's not used for the purpose that it was voted, then it has to be rolled back to the general fund and reappropriated.
Mhm.
So there's no ability to take, for the example of the monies that were for basically a boathouse for the harbor master's office. So those dollars cannot be used for something else without going back to the voters. So.
Question in that regard, does it roll back to the general fund without the voters necessarily knowing, unless they read the financials?
Well, that's true, it would.
Okay, so it doesn't become a public comment, it just kind of disappears from that line and goes back into the general fund.
So for operating
Yeah.
expenses, that's certainly true. For capital, there may be a vote to rescind.
Okay,
Yeah. For example.
So we just did that with
Tonight.
the ambulance.
Yes.
tonight we have some.
And the third was governance. And you would like to see other boards have open forums.
Do you want me to address
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
you were the governance person.
Yeah, so Mary, just for your information, we had we invited the chairs of all the boards and committees to 2 meetings last year to help us shape what we do under the governance project. And then, I think it was in June, when we all met at the high school, the boards, chairs and committee chairs of all of the committees met at the high school, I want to say June, to kind of plan out some concrete ways for the committees to work better together. One of the top things that we're working with the town folks is to improve the website to help the dissemination of information. It's just really hard to find what people are looking for, and a few other things. And we're currently planning another meeting, we hope for January. So we're in that planning stage right now. But we've been meeting with the chairs of all of the boards and committees to help us shape what we do and improve the communication. And so far, it's been very well received. And we're just gonna, keep going.
Excuse me, were
So,
department heads there as well?
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you, yes, Brian. On the June meeting, the first two meetings we had were just with board and committee chairs, and then the June meeting also had department heads. So it was all the department heads and the board and committee chairs.
So if I may follow up with a couple of those?
Could you speak up? I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing.
Could I just follow up with a couple of the comments made after my questions?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, sorry.
So thank you for the update about the governance, and I hope it trickles down to actually the boards. I mean, I think it's one thing to discuss with the chairs of the boards, but I mean, I happen to be on a board and I'm not hearing about it, so I'd like to see some of this stuff enacted across boards and committees and more transparency and discussions and questions and answers and all that. So, and then just getting back to the One Finance piece. So with the example of the harbor master floating office, did we vote to rescind those funds? I just don't recall that.
No, those are just rolled back.
Okay, so could you clarify again what funds we need to rescind and what ones just roll into the general fund?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So could you just clarify what types of items we need to vote to rescind the funds if we're not going to use them once voted in, and which ones just roll down to the general funds with no vote?
So there's no requirement to officially vote to rescind, but if you wanted to reallocate and they hadn't been rescinded yet, then there would need to be a vote. So if a capital item was sitting for 3-4 years, the Finance Committee and the Selectmen could decide to roll those dollars back to the general fund, and it doesn't require an official vote. But for example, with the ambulance funding that we recently did, there was a desire to reallocate those dollars, and so it hadn't been rescinded yet. So it was part of the approval to spend those dollars differently. So the voters were asked to rescind it and redirect it towards the ladder truck. So those dollars were still sitting in the ambulance fund. And so a need for rescission was made as part of the vote to approve the new use.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say if there's ways we could be clear on some of these things, I think it would help residents to understand the monies better, or at least myself. Thank you.
So Sarah Pierce has her hand up again.
Is there anyone?
Hi, yes, thank you for taking another question.
Yes.
I just had tried to ask this at another point and it was not the right time. So I'm just wondering, have there been any interest or are there any conversations happening about the MBTA ferry coming to Manchester? Because I know it has just opened up recently in June, a stop in Lynn, which is really only 2 towns away from Manchester. And I wondered, with the dredging of the harbor and the intentions of the dredging of the harbor, if that's been discussed at all.
I have.
Yeah, no, I mean, you read Byron's
Yeah.
recent comment?
I have read Violet's comment that we don't, it's longer, a lot longer from here to Boston than from Lynn to Boston. And we don't have a good landing place for them. And he recommended against it.
Okay, so there's no plans to do that.
Not at the moment.
Okay, and then just as far as like MBTA grants, is there a way to list on the town website which grants the town applies for that are directly connected to the MBTA project and which are just grants being applied for from the town, separated?
Let me put, a slightly different slant on that. We refer to the MBTA zoning because it's an easy name, but it has very little to do with the MBTA. It's a plan by the state to encourage towns to provide to provide multifamily housing. The connection to the MBTA is, that happens to be a good collection of towns to go after. So your question is fine, but the grants really aren't in any way related to MBTA. They are granting sources that the state would deny us if we were not to follow the 40A Section 3A law.
Well, could you put a list of which grants they would deny us if we weren't to move ahead with the MBTA project?
So there is a listing of grants that,
Downstairs.
over the last 10 years that potentially would have been denied according to the state's guidelines. So the law itself came out with 3 buckets. It came up with capital funds that primarily go to the housing authority. That's the only capital funds that have come into Manchester. There's Mass Works funds, and the third one is housing. Chris, are you remembering? I'm forgetting the designation. It's part of the
Harbor dredging,
those are Mass Works. So Mass Works, capital funds, and housing choice funds, that I think is a part of that designation. And then they came out with additional guidelines that listed a whole longer list of grants that would likely be denied if communities were not participating. So we do have that list on the website. Frankly, with the change or the new position from the AG's office, in my mind, that's become much less of a critical point. I think it's more critical, decide whether or not you want to risk getting sued or not. To me, that's a bigger issue than the grant funding.
Well, there's a big misconception in the general public about the way this whole MBTA project is being proposed to the public, is being handled in general. And I think it's important because people will say, well, if we don't go ahead with the MBTA project, we're going to lose our grant money. So I think we need to be really clear to the public what, in fact, they are in fear of losing, because I'm not sure that they're getting a clear message. I didn't get a clear message from what you just explained about the grant money and what's listed on the town website. That was very confusing to me, to be honest.
So both statements are true. Both facts are there.
Right, but then the next thing that's brought up is that the town's going to get sued. So I think that it's important to let the town residents, citizens, and whomever know that opting out is a valid option. It is an option. I think a lot has to be taken into consideration before we just start saying we're going to get sued by the Attorney General. We have really zero information of how this project is going to actually affect Manchester by the Sea. And we can't clearly state what grants are going to get taken away from us by the MBTA, yet it's constantly said that we'll lose our grant money. So there's just, it's a very fuzzy project in general, and we're so little data, even to date, as even how many multifamily homes do we have? Which areas are going to be zoned? How will this affect things? I mean, if people are complaining about pickleball court noise, which is completely legitimate, imagine the construction and the noise that will take place from adding possibly 550 units to our small coastal town. So I just think that we need to be a little more transparent and stop going right to saying that we're going to get sued if we don't do this, because there's a lot of
The
information.
Attorney
in
General
between.
has said that she will sue towns that don't follow the law. I don't know
Well,
how.
it's not,
how
then the
can we-
towns have been sued before over things. It's not the end of the world. I think it's something to consider in all reality. Is it worth looking, before we worry about getting sued, maybe we should look at some hardcore data as to how this is really going to affect our infrastructure, the parking, our water supply, the fact that we have, you know.
Okay, sure. We have a task force which is doing exactly that.
I go on every single meeting and I am informed of what the task force has gathered to this point. I'm just simply saying it seems to go from zero to lawsuit, and I think that there's a lot in between that. So I thank you for listening to my comment and would just hope that we could put some more perspective on this project as a whole, because we're not getting a lot of information. The only information is we're gonna get sued by the Attorney General if we don't do that. Instead of, let's look at the data that we actually have and how it will affect our town. And opting out, you know, Chris Only himself said in his first mission statement, he was going to look into what opting out would look like for the town, and he's on the planning board. So I think it's important to consider that aspect, that's all. Thank you very much.
I attended the forum.
On Saturday.
John and I
Yeah.
were up there. And I thought there was a lot of information being disseminated then, including grant, there was an entire slide of
List of all.
all the grants that we received in the last 10 years. I think it was made quite clear that we're not talking 550 units at all, okay? So I think that there's a moving target, and we're learning every day something new. And I think we got the latest and greatest on Saturday, and that's still a work in progress, isn't it not, Chris?
Still, it'll be work in progress for another 6 months, I imagine. But yeah, I appreciate your being at the forum, Brian, that was really helpful, and you too, John.
Yeah, I wish I could have attended that forum. It was just a Sunday morning at 10, or Saturday rather, and a lot of parents have sporting events to attend, and I would have loved to go, actually, so thank you.
But, and just to that point, a lot of things that you just mentioned, I think were discussed and touched upon at that forum.
Yeah, all of the presentation boards, I think, are downstairs, are they not? Or were they being posted?
They're up here.
They're up here somewhere. They're in
But
the
they'll
room.
be online.
They're available and will be online within the next day or so, so. It is an evolving process, and Chris is managing that, but it's true, every week the story changes, or evolves, I should say, a bit more.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak?
So it looks like Sandy has her hand back up.
Yes, Sandy.
I just wanted to add, I also went to that session on Saturday, and I think and I was speaking with people at the meeting and after the meeting, and I think it's clarity on the meaning can be very, very confusing. We throw around, we have about 400 units and we need to have 550, but it's really about the zoning, and the way that the zoning is articulated will be able to give us a certain capacity. And yet I heard other people talking about numbers of units and everything. So I think what this shows is that as we go along the process, I think that having the information disseminated and articulated very carefully and clearly will help everybody. And I think that we've heard a lot of things ramping up to this, and we're still not there yet. We don't have the consultant report in and all that, but I think it's the clarity of the information that will help everybody. So I just wanted to add that to that, just that last discussion going forward.
Thank you.
Lee has,
Yeah, hi, Lee Simmons, 291 Summer Street. Little change of direction. It is just a question, actually maybe two, but that I've kind of wondered about for a long time. It may have been discussed over the years. When you drive by the transfer station and you drive, I think, into Hamilton, you see a very, very, very large field of solar panels. Is that something Manchester has ever considered for our town? I don't mean individual homeowners, but I mean for the town, or is it the fact that we just don't have the space, which could be the answer, and it may have been something we've discussed a lot and I've just missed it. That's my question. One of them, the other one's just sort of.
so we did investigate putting solar panels at our closed landfill, and unfortunately the slopes are too steep, and because you can't penetrate the liner. So you can't put a deep pole in, you can only do the ballast approach, and the slopes are too steep for that on ours. We have looked at solar panels on different municipal buildings. Probably the water treatment plant is the most viable one. It's the largest roof area we have. If we replace the roof here at the sewer plant, that might be a potential as well. Those are the two most promising other sites. They're not that large, relatively speaking, but they're, in terms of building space, they're probably our biggest ones. The town, because those didn't pan out, going forward, we do have a contract where we purchase our electricity from a solar farm that's up in just north of here in Haverhill. So we are 80% of the town's municipal electricity that we use is coming from that solar farm.
Well, that's good to know, thank you.
So we do have that.
Okay, thank you. One other quick thing, I think at some point, my question is basically about retirement community assisted living. I'm pretty old, and I've always hoped that we would be able to do something around this town so that I don't have to go out to Route 114 if I need to. But at some point, I think they were talking about something over where South Signaling has bought all that land. Is there any discussion still about assisted living, or is that all the land that South Signaling has bought?
Cell Signaling has bought all of that land.
Okay, all right.
There's still a lot of discussion of senior housing in various forms, which is going on in the planning board.
Okay.
We're very aware that each of us is getting older.
Yeah. Some of us sooner than later, I guess, I don't know. Thank you all.
Yeah, no others at this point. Take a 5-minute break. Or?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break and make all of these people wait for us? Thank you, everyone who's attended this. We will certainly do it again. I'm not sure we're prepared to face it monthly, but, and I have received comments that it would be nice if this were not at 5:30 so that people who don't work in town could join us.
If I may make a comment, I think this was not the first time we've done this, and I don't believe, and I think it was better attended, so whatever was done to, I think, promote conversation.
Not sure that we've actually had
We have people downstairs, we've done the conversation.
Yeah, it was one of these
Conversation
here, but it was several months ago.
Right, several, yeah.
Other people have suggested that we could have a listening tour.
Right, yeah.
And perhaps in small groups, less than a quorum, meeting, going someplace to answer questions, and yes.
So I just wanted to thank the town employees and Tiffany, for promoting this successfully so people could come.
How many people logged in or logged in?
Sarah?
We're up to about 20.
I just, when I looked at the agenda and saw the item, it made no sense to me. I had no clue what it was.
It just said open meeting.
Yeah, it just said public forum and it didn't say about what, and so other people might have had that same
Yeah,
reaction, that it
we need to be more, but the
seeking
intention,
input or something like that.
the intention was to take questions on any subject.
Right, but it just wasn't listed in the agenda as that, that's all. That was my reaction.
We still have 2 minutes when we can stand up.
I couldn't help but notice. I like your house outside.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I
was there
Yeah.
Yeah, you got the epicenter right there.
I'm thinking.
Squeaky chair, huh?
Sorry.
Get from the
Tie things
Is this
down.
your third meeting today?
That's fun.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely.
I'm out of here.
You wish.
We have a bunch of kids.
We have, also the Greenscape flyers.
I just think maybe it'll.
The Greenscape flyers, dealing with like,
Five.
okay,
And also,
Where is,
Close up the traffic.
one Beaver Dam,
That's
and then 3 Anthony.
They let them.
I have no clue.
I
got rid of some. We had a whole big box.
This weekend,
Yeah,
I'll
I got
ask
rid of it, but I
tomorrow.
kept some. I kept
You got rid of it, throw it out.
It was just sitting there. There were like, like 200.
Oh, well, we wanted.
I have about how many you need?
Took it all 2,000.
2,000. I think it's,
We
I
had some from.
can't remember what.
I need to get them,
Okay.
we have a meeting,
But then if
the
you asked you to say it's
sustainability
come
group.
back before
Is it
the
days?
ZBA if they wanted
Meeting
to.
on Friday, this of course is a topic, is a bill stuffer.
I think that's what you're talking about. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so, it's
Yeah,
before
to
you
promote
get
that, and
off of
I
that one.
just need to know where they are.
It's on the left.
I told them I knew who to talk to.
Yeah.
Because we'd have to make arrangements with friends.
There's something like 45 trailers.
There's time to do
That they're
that.
removing, so,
We should talk to
you know,
Chelsea.
and then we've done a horrible one.
Yeah,
Probably has flyers.
yes. Well, these were, well, they're not free now. I mean, the copy's free, it's all laid out.
Separate lots, 39.
There are other sources.
And then you're changing it.
Let's do one trouble.
I mean, it's not illegal.
You make it look very.
Well, that's so interesting.
oh, this will be fun.
Is that better? Did you switch chairs?
I did.
I love them. Like it?
You're back,
You're
you're back.
happy, you're happy.
100% now?
You're not happy, no one's happy.
I suspect you were never that much below 100%.
Thanks for noticing.
Well, that's not like deathbed or anything, that's just, that's inconvenience for sure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, they're still outside. They're still putting the siding on. Yeah, well, that's, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Malcolm, you look.
Let's go right to the home and sign it. Okay, reconvening. Our next, item on the agenda is Affordable Housing Trust, Manchester Housing Authority update. And Mr. Ford?
Yeah, why don't I take the lead? Thank you for putting some time aside. My name is John Feuerbach. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, and I come here speaking on behalf of the Affordable Housing Trust, but also the Manchester Housing Authority. And the purpose of this visit here tonight is a continuation of our engagement with the Select Board. You guys all know that, you know, we take a step forward. We're doing it in consultation with important committees and boards such as the Select Board. And specifically, I want to just talk about the request for proposal process, where we are right now, the status of that. And when we talk about the development plan of the Housing Authority, and the Affordable Housing Trust. We're talking about Newport Park, we're talking about the Plains, we're talking about Loden Place. At one point in time, we had Pleasant Street on the table and we took it off, and as background, we tried to solicit developers under a competitive request for proposal on 2 occasions. Both efforts failed, notwithstanding our great efforts. And also the support we showed in the request for proposal, the non-binding town vote we had in November of 2021. You okay there, right? Affordable housing, community affordable, always does this to you.
Near and dear to my heart, always.
You know, so
Is this wrinkled?
So we did some polling of possible development partners about why there was no response to the RFP, and it basically led us to change course and go to a request for qualifications. We're not actually seeking to select a developer, but we're seeking to engage with knowledgeable developers who would work with us, go over our current development plan, see whether or not it's feasible, what are some improvements. We did that in the spirit of then coming back amongst ourselves, the Housing Authority and the Affordable Housing Trust, to relook at our plan in hopes of moving forward with a competitive request for proposal in the future. We had the due date in August. We received 1 application from the Preservation of Affordable Housing. Although it's 1, folks might think, oh my God, I can't believe you only got 1. We feel quite fortunate because they are a Boston-based developer, but they're involved in, I think, 12 or 13 communities throughout the United States. A very, very influential and important developer, as well as they have experience in working with public housing authorities. The type of work and the type of engagement we're talking about a developer having with the PHA, Manchester Housing Authority, they're doing that in at least 3, 4 other cities. Somerville, Boston, there's 1 in St. Louis, there's 1 in DC. So they bring some very incredible on-the-ground experience that we would benefit from. Before we go any further, I just want to clarify for the select board as well as for those who are listening at home, when we talk about a request for qualifications and we're talking about POA as the applicant, we're not talking about a developer at this time. An RFQ is quite different than an RFP. The RFQ is really sort of loosey-goosey. We made it clear in our RFP we want to engage with you, a couple meetings, help us, versus a request for proposal where it's an actual legal process where we're seeking to select a developer. Our plan now is to work with POA, engage with them, have some back and forth on what their thoughts on our plan, improvements, so that we can then reconvene and issue a request for proposal at a later date where we would be in a better position to actually select a developer. We met with POA, Housing Authority and the Affordable Housing Trust, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It was the first time we met with them. They introduced themselves, had a very tight PowerPoint, talked about the projects they worked on. They talked about their understanding of our current development plan, and they sort of talked about areas where they would suggest, I guess, the challenges that we would face, challenges that any developer would face. So the purpose here is the 2 main takeaways, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Housing Authority and other fellow Affordable Housing Trust members here, so feel free to chime in. My 3 main takeaways. 1, we are really fortunate to have a very, very capable and experienced applicant to help us. I think that bodes well as we plan to meet with them going forward. We're going to get some great knowledge from them, and it'll help us moving forward. Second takeaway is that but after looking at some of the sites, specifically Newport and a little bit of the Plains, they said there's some development challenges, probably more so in Newport Park. And when you go into Newport Park, you go in that back left, everyone knows it's a sort of a tricky slope and there's some water back there. They called into question the feasibility of actually having a large footprint that could create the housing that we anticipate in our current proof of concept plan. That was the first thing. And then the second, they said, our plan really hinges on units. We have to have the one-to-one match for all the public housing authority sites, units. I believe we have 84 there. When you add up what we were proposing in Newport Park, the Plains and Loading Place, we're about, I think, 50 or 60. Our understanding by including Pleasant Street, that brings in approximate 30 more. That gets us to a point of enough units that would attract the developer. POA mentioned that right now, in our current plan, they feel there's insufficient density and number of units that would call into question the economic viability. The elephant in the room at that meeting is, what is the status of Pleasant Street? I think we all said amongst ourselves that if we had that, that could provide an economic engine to help finance the development plan, but also it would help finance any plan we have for rehabilitating the current units. Again, because what we've been talking about is new construction at the public housing sites, and to the extent possible and feasible, is to then have a spin-off and create rehabilitation opportunities in the housing authority sites. So before I pause and have some comments, I just wanted to emphasize, I know there has been back and forth on Pleasant Street. Is it in the plan? Can we include it in the plan? Is it too presumptuous to have it in the plan, just given the situation with siting? But we heard firsthand from POA that that would be an incredibly important land area to help us with our plan. And I say that in the context of, we all know what's going on in the town and the support for trying to manage our ability to have affordable units so that we could get close, one, meet a great need of community affordable housing in the town, but also get closer to our 10%. What we've found out from POA is by not having a site such as the Pleasant Street, it really makes it a very difficult challenge for our current plan right now. And I just want to stop at that and give anyone else who might want to have a comment.
Before, are there questions from the board at this point? John?
Yeah, I just need a clarification, John. Early on, you said you need a number of units that is equal to the number of units that exist, which is 84. So is 84 some magic number, or they're really saying we need to build 84 units to make the economics work?
Feel free.
Didn't they say maybe more than 84?
All right, but
They
it's,
said either a 1 or 2-to-1 match in order to make it
all
economically
right,
feasible.
are they talking about a 2-to-1 match? In other words, is the number of existing units key, or they just, no, we gotta have about 90 units to make the math work here?
The rules.
Oh, they got rules. All right, I need to know, there are rules.
So, John, one of the things that you have to understand about this is that the state is providing subsidy to operate these units.
Sure.
But the subsidy is very, very small. And so what the housing authority is trying to operate on are the rents that are actually being paid by the tenants, which is 1/3 of their monthly income is the rent, which is probably a social security check.
It can be anything, yeah.
Yeah, but it's probably a couple $100. Well, it's pretty tough to run an apartment complex on a couple $100 of rent per month per unit. And that's why it's very important to try to expand beyond just these subsidized units and create a block of affordable units that can generate more income from rent, so they're not just paying $300, they're paying $800 or $900 a month, or whatever it's gonna be, to provide the cash flow they need to pay debt on what the cost of what these new units are gonna cost.
Understood. So right now, we have 84 units, and they say we need to have at least 80 or 90 units. If we had only 50 units, they would have said we need at least 50 units, because that's the rule,
Yeah,
more or
something like
less.
that.
Okay, I understand. Wanted to know where that number was coming from.
So we just wanted to take a moment to bring this to your attention because we know you're having important discussions regarding the use of Pleasant Street. And we didn't want you to go into that type of discussion without hearing from us what we're hearing from our RFQ applicant.
I'm perfectly with anyone else who would like to speak.
Could I just say one other thing here about this? It doesn't have to be necessarily Pleasant Street. If the town could identify another piece of land, in the past, I know back in the early 90s, there was a plan to put affordable housing around the Moses Hill Standpipe. Maybe that's another way we could do this, I don't know. We need to think a little bit outside the box here. We know the town's got other needs that it has to take into account, so it's kind of a little bit of a balancing act here.
Certainly for me, the need to deal with our lack of affordable housing is a pretty major consideration.
Question?
Yes.
How large of a lot would be needed in order to sweeten the pot to make it economically viable for a developer? We keep talking Pleasant Street, but how much acreage?
We're talking what, is it 18 units per acre, something like that?
Yeah, 15 to 18 units an acre would be a town home development.
So how many acres would we need?
Five or six.
5 or 6.
5 or 6 over and above Newport Park, et cetera, existing footprint. Okay.
Anyone? Sheila?
Yeah, Sheila Hill, 2 Running Ridge Road. I apologize for being out of the loop of this for a while. When you were talking about Pleasant Street, initially the conversation was about building market rate housing there, correct? And I'm not sure now, it sounds like you're talking about having affordable housing there, or the market rate was gonna be, 1% of small affordable.
I don't want to speak for the select board, but we got the indication that that really shouldn't be something that we should reference in our RFQ. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the reason why is because we've been given the indication that there's other public purpose that could be used on Pleasant Street. So for that reason, we didn't include reference in our RFQ. We did include reference. We
But
said.
that wasn't her question, John. She's asking, are we talking the
Market
Does the
rate
developer
versus
need this
affordable?
market rate housing to offset their?
I think that's something that would be to be determined, but I think market rate housing would be an option.
Yeah.
Because the offshoot of that would be we're getting cash flow perhaps, or we're getting some acquisition that could then be used to support what Chris is saying, to support the very difficult operating situation that the current housing authority units have, and it would be an engine to hopefully help with the rehab of units.
So it would be my understanding, you'd probably want to do this as a friendly 40B then. To enable to, because if we're adding more market rate units to the inventory, and you've spoken to this before.
We don't want to make it harder.
The delta becomes bigger.
Right.
Okay, if we do a 40B all rental, all those units would count as part of the equation.
Yes. There'll be a problem for it.
I think the challenge is because of the structure with the state, that we need to get the state to buy in and hopefully provide some money to get it off their rolls and into a developer's.
Anne, if I may,
Thank you, I'm sorry, I had forgotten that you were going to be remote.
And I
Yeah.
wanna finish my question too, but go ahead.
Yes.
hi. I wanted to ask John, and I know we had, talked about this before, but are we able to modify the footprints that are on our current affordable housing land and, either add more buildings or go up higher on those? I'm not saying in lieu of other properties, but in addition to. Thank you.
I interpret that to mean our current plan, or are you referring to the current buildings?
Current buildings and current land.
Yeah.
For example, can we look at Newport Park and add more buildings or add on to the current buildings in addition to building on other property? In other words, can we sweeten that pot anymore?
So, well, I think that has been part of what we've been talking about. We've looked at Newport Park pretty carefully. As John said earlier, it's difficult land. Out back, there's an intermittent stream and there's conservation issues, and it obviously goes right up the hill there. Probably the Plains has more buildable area, and that I think was sort of part of what we were looking at, to maybe add some more housing up in there, more, that would be affordable housing, would be senior housing.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we're working with POAP, is to have them give us ideas as to what we can do. Reasonable, it was financially feasible.
Definitely, actually on Loading Place Road, where there is now family housing, our intention was to definitely add more family housing in there. Let me just see if I can summarize. Newport Park looks difficult to build, so it's unlikely that we will be able to put new buildings there.
At our current projection, the proof of concept plan was looking at approximately 18 units. What we're hearing from POA is that might be ambitious.
18 new units.
18 new, a building that would have 18 new units.
At Newport?
Yes.
And the Plains?
Plains, a proof of concept, we were looking at approximately 26. I agree with Gretchen that I think that is probably a promising site. The only issue that they raised is that, and we're looking at if you go to the back of the Plains, so I think it's where the community center is.
Yes.
That could be replaced with a 3-story, maybe 4-story multifamily building.
Yeah.
It seems to me that would work out. They only said, if you look behind there in the back, there's some residents who might have some comment on that.
Blue Heron that's right abutting that property.
And Loading Place Road, which is the third location, you would expect more family housing there.
Our proof of concept plan, again, this is all very preliminary, hasn't barely been, but they were looking, 6 duplexes totaling 12 units. So it'd be like a side-by-side. Currently, right now, we have 4 3-bedroom rentals. That's 3.2 acres there.
Let's go wetlands.
But we have some wetland issues.
Yeah. I interrupted you, Sheila, sorry.
Okay, that was good discussion. What I take from this, which really was my original line of questioning, was to take us, the word on the street, take a slice of Powder House Hill seems abundantly premature right now to any of this discussion, and it would seem to involve Newport Park most likely, but is that part of is your concept involve needing any of Powder House Hill to execute?
Our current plan doesn't include that.
This plan that you're
The
working with?
proof of concept that we looked at, it didn't include it, and when we met with POA recently, we weren't talking about that with them.
But Steve Gang did come and make a proposal to us, which we all said we would take into consideration. And that was to swap a piece of land that's part of Newport Park for another part of Powder House Hill. Now, we said we don't know if that's legally possible or whatever, and so it was left that he was gonna go back and do some research and then come back and tell us if we consider it.
Yeah, these are the two conversations I'm trying to get in sync, because I had part of it with Steve today. So,
But I think that even what Steve was talking about was not us taking any part of Powder House Hill out and back. He was talking about us getting more frontage on Pine Street.
Yeah.
And them getting more out and back. So I really don't think we are planning to do anything with the Powder House
And that was-
station.
I would say to use the word preliminary on this conversation is almost, so we're not being kind to the word preliminary.
preliminary is premature.
You know, it was just brought to our attention.
Good idea.
We're all ears. We said, Steve, why don't you check into it and get back to us? For all we know, it's like, hey, red light.
Yeah.
Don't even consider it.
Yeah.
But if he comes back and says, you know, it seems like there's a legal possibility, then, you know, we are all about engagement. We just, we'll look at it at that point.
I think there's a marsh and stream involved in this discussion, which that they would have an interest in protecting, swapping for a piece of us.
As would we.
Oh, yeah, which was more thought. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else want to? Really? Nothing from Muffin?
No, John has outlined the issues, I think eloquently and succinctly, and I think there's the matter of the Pleasant Street property and where it fits in the facilities plan that is coming to fruition, and just what can happen with that property.
Or a few acres somewhere.
Or a few acres somewhere. Yes, yes.
How big is the Pleasant Street footprint? You
It
said we
is
need like
7
5
acres.
It's 7 acres.
7 acres.
There's only 3 acres of development.
Yeah.
Only 3 acres.
You go back there and it's like water in like,
So
yeah.
only 3 developable acres on Pleasant Street.
Towards the
You
front.
It can be more dense now, can't you, the FAR as far as density goes then? If you're going a 7-acre developable site, all right, that allows X amount of units. And then, I mean, of the entire site, it's 7 acres, you're only gonna build on 3, you take the entire 7 acres as part of the formula.
Yeah, it can almost be seen as like a planned unit development.
I think the real issue is gonna be what it looks like.
I also think how dirty it is, we wouldn't even know about that yet.
Yeah, no, it's,
I guess I would ask, is there a timeline for the facilities project study to come to fruition and be discussed and bring some decisions to the town?
We asked for some specific revisions to what they presented us, and I expect
It'll be ready for your next meeting in
it'll be
November.
ready for our next meeting, we will discuss it. I think probably a specific discussion of the Pleasant Street property should be a separate agenda item at a future meeting rather than tied in with, just so that people know that we're specifically talking about that.
Thank you.
When do you talk to BOA next?
We have a date set, I think for we have a placeholder, I think, for 3 weeks, but we really said we'd get back to them. We wanted to have this opportunity to share this with you, but also get comments from you. But I think probably within 3 weeks. We just don't want to meet with them to just meet. We want them to have a definable task. For example, we can say, why don't you provide a density build out assuming a certain parcel. I think we may have left it
They were gonna look at it without a parcel.
without, yeah, I was gonna say, a reduced, our plan had certain assumptions, now take out one of the assumptions, come forward with a seat of the pants.
And our meeting is November 14th.
When you say take out one of the assumptions, are you talking about the Pleasant Street assumption? So, okay, what is this? So how does that project, can it stand alone just the way it is? Because this facility plan is coming down the pipe in the next week or so. But the disposition of the Pleasant Street space is not number one on the list there. And the decision as to what's gonna happen with that is probably a little bit further down.
Well, yes, we will see, because I think what the facilities plan is suggesting for that location is a public safety building. And we need to weigh the importance of a public safety building versus dealing with our affordable housing problem. And so I think we need to look at the final facilities and discuss it. And so a month, maybe before Christmas.
It's coming soon.
I have that horrible feeling.
The stores are full of it.
Greg, is there anything else we need to?
No, so I guess in terms of a timeline, what would be most helpful to you folks?
Yesterday.
I had a feeling you were gonna say that.
Next week.
So the sooner the better.
Yeah, I mean, this is a project that's been swirling and, I don't know, are we in year 3?
I would keep going.
Oh, yeah, see, right,
Yeah.
and I fully respect the process that's necessary and the time that's necessary to make these kinds of decisions. But we have been at this quite a while, probably 30 years, although 4 or 5 most recent. And it clearly is it does still feel like there is appetite in the community. And I hope that appetite never wanes. But it's incumbent on us to get going.
And
And
can
when you
I
think of-
state the obvious, which is every affordable unit we create gets us closer to the SHI and
Yep.
one more 40B. So this is a great way of producing affordable housing.
Particularly if it's done as a friendly 40B so that the affordable units count.
Yes.
And that we don't offset it with market rate.
No, the market rate.
market rate units.
Market rate counts.
The market rate, in a 40B, market rate rental units count toward the affordable house, toward the
If you have a certain-
I
SHI.
know, but we have other projects on the
Do we?
town blotter for huge numbers of market rate, so.
Yeah. Right.
I just want to keep that formula in mind.
But most importantly, we get
absolutely.
the control and design of it too, which is.
Yes.
So you're willing, you mentioned, it doesn't have to be Pleasant, but it
No,
needs
right.
5 to 6 acres. Do you think about where, do you have a preferred location for those
I mean,
5 or 6? Or?
Greg, the only thing that we're mindful of is, right from the moment we were established, we talked about our mission. We want to be as close, we want to be walkable as preferred. We want to include residents in the life, in the blood of the town. So a central location has always been important to us. That said, look where we are now, so anything would be important to consider.
We should not take anything off the table, any good suggestion off the table. Walkability is important, but at this point, it may be a nice to have as opposed to a must have.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you for listening.
Is it helpful, should we keep this like an open, and come back in a couple months after we meet with POA, just so to keep you?
Oh, yes, please. We're not going away.
Right.
I haven't seen a bigger crowd in a long time.
Yeah, and now we are all going away, sorry.
I'm free, but free.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Wow. Quite a constituency here.
You are. You don't want to sign
Okay. Too late. Mr. Dam, would you tell us about PFAS?
PFAS, yes, I would love to. So I'll start wherever you guys would like in terms of, I'm sure you saw the write-up I had in the Cricket, which kind of goes at things from my perspective. There's been other voices on the topic that I'm happy to discuss, but I can start wherever you'd like, or we can.
Well, there was a fairly complete write-up that was in our packets, which I'm sure we've all memorized.
So they had your FAQs.
Yep. Yeah, so, I mean, there's some pretty big numbers in there. I don't know if that's something you guys would like to discuss, but in general, PFAS is everywhere. It's in everything. Our water supply is no different. We've stopped short of trying to identify exactly where, or have been able to, even if we wanted to, where these things came from. So that's where we're starting at. This is something that started, from my perspective, 4 or 5 years ago at the state level. The state did pass an MCL that we have been under.
MCL?
Maximum contaminant limit. So we need to be under the maximum, and we have been. EPA has said that they're not consulting with the state of Massachusetts. They're saying, we have our own experts and we've looked at the data and we think it should be lower. And so that's what they've proposed, but that will not be promulgated until probably the end of the year. At which time we would, Massachusetts would have no choice but to adopt the lower of the standards. They could also decide to go even lower if they wanted to go in that direction. And so that's what we've been dealing with from my perspective for at least 4 or 5 years now. And it's just now starting to come to a head. And so, from my point of view, from the town's point of view, we've been monitoring this. We've been trying to keep up on all the latest articles and, discussions on this topic. And that's what we've been doing. And beyond that, we said if we do need to get to a point, or if the town would like, or if there's any other reason within, these kind of articles and all the education that's going on in this topic, how are we gonna meet it? How are we gonna treat for it? How are we gonna, what are we going to do? And so we've been working on that for several years as well. First it started with the well, which is higher than the pond. So as we've done that, we've always thought that we were probably likely on a long enough timeline, going to have to treat at the well no matter what. And so that's what we've thought we were going to do. We have a plan for that. We know what it will cost and how we will do it. We do need to do some other studies, the bench scale and pilot scale testing, which, to get into the details on that just a little bit is, we need to test our water. So what else is in our water? What, needs to come out before the treatment for the PFAS or vice versa. And so, as we did that for the well specifically, that water chemistry needs to take out the iron and manganese, which is, very common obviously in groundwater wells. So that is a separate process from the process that actually takes out the PFAS. And so what you get is vessels that will take out the iron and manganese. That's the green sand, which there are several different kinds of green sand. So green sand is kind of like the Google as a search engine type, like that kind of thing. saran wrap versus, cling wrap, that kind of thing. So we have many types of green sand that we need to evaluate, which will take out our specific, because there's many forms of iron and manganese, we need to take out our specific iron manganese. So one type of green sand might work better to do that than another. So it gets through that, we've taken out all the green, all the iron manganese, now we have to take out the actual PFAS, so there's hundreds of constituents of PFAS, the most common are PFOS and PFOA, POFS and POFA. Those are actually the ones that are identified in the EPA regs if they get there. And so, depending on what those constituents are, we might want a different type of granule activated carbon. There's different manufacturers of these things that have slightly different surface areas and loading rates and backwash interval, all these types of engineering, things have to go into the decisions that we make. And so that's where the bench scale and the pilot scale testing comes in. So that is something that we will have to do in the, very short term. I'm getting a proposal on that probably in the next week or two, to do not only Lincoln Street, but since we're gonna have that equipment in town, we're gonna be paying for those labs and those shipping costs, we might as well also do the same testing at Gravelly Pond. And then there's another hairball theory that we have that maybe it's actually better for us to build a big pipe that goes from Lincoln Street up to Gravelly Pond, and we just do all of that treatment at Gravelly Pond and then pump it back into the distribution system. So that's another kind of thing, and that has a much bigger life cycle cost analysis that we have to perform on, these intervals for changing out the media and backwashing and energy consumption, and there's actual chemicals that we put in, ahead of this and behind that, there's a lot that goes into it. This is all part of the bench scale and pilot scale testing. We need to get all that information before we, spend $20-something million on this treatment. So, it's money well spent, it's money that has to be spent, and, we need to do it sooner rather than later, but, so that, from my perspective, is kind of where we're at now, where we're gonna be going, and then it does seem, one second, is just the one thing, when EPA passes their reg, whatever it ends up being, if it's a little bit less or a little bit more than what they proposed, we'll probably have 3 or 4 years to come into compliance with that MCL. So we will potentially be over that MCL until we get this treatment installed, but that is kind of anticipated as EPA is drafting the reg and enforcing it, so, sorry.
My first question is, you say you have to treat water, as it is. And I gather the Lincoln Street well water is quite different from the Gravelly Pond water. What happens if you mix the two together?
So again, it's the same exercise, we need to do the bench scale and pilot scale testing to know exactly. But I mean, we can do a mass balance for all these things, so we'll have a good idea.
So you could do one round of testing that would cover the possibility of 2 separate treatments and a combined treatment.
Yeah, I mean, there's an incremental additional charge, if you will, for that, but it's something that there is
Set up and,
a certain amount of, savings from doing it all at once rather than doing 3 separate.
and that's what you're
trials.
planning to do?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I have something else and it's gone, but anyone else, please?
Just a question, so you've outlined a lot of good things that are in process. Can you clarify the timeline? So all this testing, when's that gonna be completed so that the residents will have a better understanding about, when to kind of re-engage and look at the analysis, and when do we anticipate completing that testing?
That's a great question. So we will commence that testing as soon as possible. Like, I need to get the proposal and we need to get the equipment, it's trailer mounted equipment that'll be on site, and then we, send samples of our water, all that
Do you
kind of
need
thing.
money now?
So I need to see what the final number is, but I think we have enough ARPA funds to cover it now. It'll be a couple $100,000, but I think we have roughly that left, so, Greg and I will talk about, if we need to go to a fall town meeting, but I think we have.
The fall town meeting is creeping closer and
I
closer.
know, yeah, I will have it, I hope this week, if not, I was promised I would have it by Halloween, but, that would be too late for a fall town meeting probably, but.
Yep.
Either way, so I will get back to you on that, I don't have that answer tonight, but the timeline question, it will be ongoing. We will get information sooner rather than later, however, we do have seasonal differences in our water. And so before we can spend tens of millions of dollars on this stuff, we are going to want that seasonal, and DEP will actually probably require
The
it
answer might be, it's gonna take us a year
Might take us
to
about a year.
complete the testing.
to complete it. We will have intermittent, discussions about it, we will post the results, we will, I will give a letter to the Cricket or otherwise, saying where we're at, but, yeah, it's gonna take at least that long to get the final numbers, but there'll be sort of periodic
Okay,
check-ins.
so if you start this fall, we'll be starting this fall?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's
We're in
late
fall right
fall,
now,
but
so
yeah.
like, within the next couple of months to be
Yep.
anticipated to
Yep.
start, okay. So let's say we go through all of all of 2024, calendar year 2024.
Yep.
And while we're in the middle of the budgeting process for fiscal year 26,
Mhm.
that's what we would be targeting for coming back to the residents with, here's what we think we're gonna need
Yep, for construction.
for construction.
There, again, if, I will get the LCCA before, before Halloween.
LCC.
So life cycle cost analysis of, the kind of, of the kind of vetting out at a more detailed level, the cost that we will incur over the life of the project. So I will get that in the next month, and that will inform, doing a pipe from Lincoln Street up to, that doesn't change. So we might be able to take that on in FY '25 versus FY '26. So those construction dollars might be able to be moved around sooner rather than later, and that's a part of that exercise. But that's, what we anticipate in terms of the pilot.
How's the availability of pipe these days?
Better than it was 2 years ago, but yeah, it's still, cost premium, I think that's more now going away from the materials aspects of it, more in just the inflation pressures on wages and, that kind of thing, but.
John?
Yeah, so, if you pretty much decided that it's gotta be piping Lincoln Street up to Gravelly as opposed to processing water in situ, both places?
So I have not come to that conclusion yet. In terms of capital expenditures.
Yeah.
It would be a little bit more expensive, believe it or not, to install that pipe. But if we are replacing media at two separate locations at twice the frequency over the course of 25 years, it might actually be that the pipe is cheaper over the 25 years. So that
Yeah,
is,
although
so I have not convinced myself that on the financial end of things, that is the best way to go. However, there are other intangible, non-financial benefits of maintaining Lincoln Street as its own pumping source into the distribution system versus everything going through Gravelly Pond and vice versa. So it's a pretty in-depth analysis that we're trying to.
So there's operational trade-offs and financial trade-offs that you need to.
Yeah. So I'm still not 100% sure over the course of 25 years which way the financial will go. However, the operational is in favor more of actually maintaining Lincoln Street as its own treatment source.
Right, and your contaminant mass balance load is half of what it would otherwise be, approximately, for each location. So you're not throwing out as much stuff as frequently. In total you are, but
Yeah.
on each location. All right, a lot of factors going in there, money of which is only one.
There's a lot.
How do, excuse me, currently, how do our waters compare to other municipalities?
So
Are we,
Yep.
based on what I read in the Cricket, we're in trouble? Are we in trouble?
We're certainly in no more trouble than anybody else. We're actually, under the current MCL, which is good. There are several that especially in Massachusetts, that are above the MCL, and they're treating now, or they're, in
We were in trouble,
crisis
thinking
mode.
on our case.
Yeah, oh yeah. We would be changing the, tune for sure. So, those sources that were over the current MCL, they were immediately thrown into with no prior knowledge, just do a $20 million treatment pipe project or, pipeline or whatever, or just take your wells offline. We are not there. We are working through the kind of minutia of the details, and we will get to a point where we know exactly what we're gonna do, before the MCL changes on us. Now that being said, if something crazy gets written into that last MCL, then I might, have to walk this back a little bit, but we are trying. In terms of other communities, so like for instance, I live in Wenham, I'm on the Water Commission in Wenham. We have wells that are similar to Lincoln Street. They are about the similar amount of PFAS, by the way. So they're roughly, above 10 but under 20. So we're not currently considering treatment, but if these MCLs that our EPA is proposing, then we will be going through that process. So I would say, and there's no redundant source in Wenham, and there's no, it will be, this is what you do. So that, that's kind of a real thing. The bigger, so MWRA, for example, all the communities that are on MWRA, they do not have to, they will be under the MCL. I'm not sure how they manage to do that, but that's what I hear. I guess the Quabbin is well protected, so there's that. Who else? So that's I think, and then so this treatment process that actually removes the PFAS is granular activated carbon. That is not a new technology. That is not something that might work or whatever. Like that's something that people use for various reasons in water treatment all the time. And so Hamilton, for instance, probably has PFAS in their wells, but they already have GAC, so they don't have a corresponding upgrade to make. So that's kind of another end of the spectrum, is they kind of lucked out, that they already have that treatment.
So I think it's worth just reiterating the kind of numbers we're
Bucks-wise.
dealing with here. So parts per trillion are extremely, extremely small. And I think you had in your FAQ 1 second, 31,000 some odd years.
It's insane.
We're talking about quantities that are extremely difficult to even detect. So let's say our water had zero. I would venture to say that all of us would continue to put PFAS into our bodies because of all the other sources. So we have to remember that water is not the sole source of this contaminant.
And so to kind of go on that point is like when the state first initially came out with their regs for managing under 20 parts per trillion, we had very big concerns on the water industry side that like Teflon tape that you put on every single plumbing fixture in your, we had it in our well or at the treatment plant, but also in your homes and everywhere else. That is on that, and so that is not counted in the what we're trying to deal with. We immediately went back and retrofitted all of our taps and all of the things that are in either the pond facility or the well, and removed all the Teflon tape, which you can imagine was not something we planned on doing or whatever. But that would have added PFAS to the water that we were unknowingly doing. There's also protocols in the testing itself where our guys that are taking this out, I'm not kidding when I say that, are not allowed to wear deodorant. They're not allowed to eat certain consumable product, like fast food wrappers and stuff like that. Like, don't touch it.
They can't wear mascara.
Yeah, use this. No certain soaps and stuff like that. So like it's very much something they have to consider when they're doing that testing. Is the cross contamination. But
if you have Teflon pans, you're getting more than what our water is providing you today. So it's just, I don't say that to scare, I just put it into context of what we're dealing with here.
And that's the other thing, is it's not really regulated at the, the bottled water, at the food, consumable, products, it's not, it's very much in that. So
Your FAQ said that you tested water that had been filtered. This is through a home filtration system?
Yeah, so that was the other thing that, as we were working on at the task force level, it seems like everybody's trying to latch onto the PFAS craze, and they're coming out with a new product that may or may not be effective at certain places, but again, they're not doing the piloting testing, they're not doing the state lab testing that we are doing. And so I said, well, all right, we'll buy one. So we bought one, we brought it up, we actually ran our filter or our water as we test it. We put one sample into a bottle that went to the lab, and this is Manchester sample for the month. We put another one through their filter into their pitcher and poured that into a sample bottle, and we sent that one off. And they actually wanted us to send that sample back to their lab, which we did, but we also sent it to our state certified lab. And there was no measurable difference in the, quantities that they were measuring on the, from the sample that we sent for our test to the sample that went through their filter, there was no difference. And actually, the one that we sent them, they actually reversed the numbers. So it looked like the one that went through their pitcher created more PFAS. Like we assumed that when they reported it back to us, looked like it was creating PFAS, which maybe it was something to do with their cross-contamination in their lab equipment. Like, so this is the level of kind of nuance in all of these things, and it's just impossible to say.
And these assays, at a parts per trillion, I gotta believe the reproducibility is, you put it through, you get number 4. You don't like that number? Let's put it through again. You get 6.
Yeah, so we actually
And
sent our
it's,
samples to multiple labs because there's only 2 in the state and the testing is new for them. And the parts per trillion is, new for them. Most of the stuff we test for is milligrams per liter, which is,
Right.
ppm. So, it's parts per million or something. So it's just not even in the same ballpark. Yeah, and then that's the other thing is the testing labs and the methods for testing, certain numbers get thrown out because they're not statistically significant and stuff like that. So that's another reason why you see the kind of noise in the numbers. But if you're going if that noise, and we measure, six different PFAS components, if that noise is in the wrong direction, so you don't get to throw out those samples, they're now additive, you can get to 20 pretty quick. And that's what happens.
We have a minute or two. Is there anybody online who?
I don't see any hands up.
Okay.
So I guess my message is, we're working on it. I think we've been ahead of this issue all throughout. This is something that I've been dealing with, on a professional level before I was looking at it from Manchester's level. We are certainly in a better position than some of our other surrounding communities, but everybody's in the same boat.
Are they all, when you say all in the same boat, you said, well, Wenham, you have a front row seat at Wenham, they're about the same numbers. And if you look at the surrounding communities, we're all kind of, I think there's one, I think Essex doesn't have any or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they pulled that off either, but yeah.
But we're, in general, we all have, not big issues, but issues.
Yep. Yeah, I think.
They're not big issues, but they're really expensive issues.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I think that's a better way of saying it, I think.
So I do have a hand up, Allison Anholt White, is her hand up?
Allison?
Yeah. Hi, Alison Anholt White, 9 Spiral Hill. I just have a couple of questions for Chuck. I'm wondering, given the worldwide anxiety about PFAS in general, is there some way in which the manufacturers are going to be restricted or they're having their processes changed so that the production of PFAS will decrease over time? And if we're investing, little towns are investing a large amount of money in mitigating PFAS, would that ultimately be reduced to the point where it's not such an issue anymore?
I'm not sure I get the last part of that, but.
Well, I just mean that if the manufacturer of the Teflon and the firefighting equipment, all those things are obliged or made to not use that material any longer, is that going to change the amount of PFAS ending up in our water supply?
So potentially, I would say, these things are, as you know, are called forever chemicals, and so what's there will remain there until it's, moved to the next slot. So I do think that, I think it already is restricted at some level as being manufactured in the United States, but that, anything that comes from overseas could contain it.
Sure.
And there's certainly, still uses. So, I think that's the thing. I think they are, being held responsible in sort of the litigation. All PFAS manufacturers, will need to pay something, but it's certainly not gonna be enough to offset, the numbers.
And the other question is, after you've filtered out the PFAS, where does the waste material go?
Yeah, so unfortunately, that's still kind of up in the air. I mean, I think ultimately it will be incinerated or landfilled. hopefully in a lined landfill that, is not leaching, the contaminants
Right.
back.
Otherwise just goes around again.
And honestly, incineration is not necessarily, conventional incineration is probably not hot enough to destroy the PFAS either. So that's kind of the next phase of this. We are, our current permit for our wastewater treatment plant, we will start to have to test it. And so the question will be, at what point do they say, you no longer need to test it, you need to treat for it? So that's, something else that might be added. Of course, if we're treating it on the water side down to zero, then the only additive between there and the wastewater plant is the other consumables, or what, areas where that would come back into the wastewater stream, is the human interaction. So, it's definitely, something that, and that's, I think, most of the more promising technologies that I see for treatment are not necessarily in water treatment, but actually in destruction of the contained media, and, how we deal with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think we've done as much to you as we're going to tonight.
Alright.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, please stop by or invite me back. On to the next one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you.
I know, Ann, you're moving right along here.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed.
I'm
Which is
I'm
now
sure we're on
the step
schedule.
goal,
No,
right?
it's- it's-
Okay, the next thing is the special town meeting warrant. And we need to close that by October 30th.
The 30th is have to
Drop dead.
hold, that's the drop dead date, so I was suggesting, have your discussion tonight, we advance items that you want. The planning board has a hearing on Monday, the 23rd, and so that'll be determinant as to whether they have an article ready as well. And so I would suggest that you hold a special select board meeting next week, either say Wednesday or Thursday, in order to finalize the warrant.
So there are things that are still open.
There are a few items that are still open that could
Okay.
pop up still.
Yes.
In addition to that, we did receive a few petition articles today,
Oh, okay.
and 2 or 3 were delivered at 4:58. So we haven't had a chance to verify those signatures yet, so we will do that tomorrow.
What are the subjects?
One petition that we did verify is in relationship to the community center and seeking voters' permission to authorize you to enter into negotiations either to purchase or to take by eminent domain the property. That may not be necessary if I was going to suggest that we also have an article that allows you to enter into a multi-year lease with the property owner, not the building owner, but the property owner. So that was one petition article. A second one had to do with requiring all zoning changes to be voted by ballot. We'll have to check on the legality of that. That may require a home rule petition to the legislature. I'm not sure. I have to look into that.
As you look into that one, would you look to see if other municipalities have something similar?
Right.
Right, is that what you're saying? Okay.
So that was the second one. A third one is in relationship to, there are 2 of them. I haven't had a chance to read them carefully, but there were 2 related to Powder House Hill. And wanting to ensure, I believe, a quick read, ensure that, that is Article 97 lands, meaning it is, must remain as conservation lands, and if any change were to take place, it would require a special act of the legislature, and you would, typically, they require at least similar lands to replace what's being taken out. Oftentimes, it's a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 match.
I'm sorry, I am taking notes, which I probably shouldn't bother with, but what is the name of the article under which land is put in permanent conservation? You just said it.
So those are Article 97 lands.
97.
Yeah, yeah. So, Article 97 of the state constitution
Yes.
is what that refers to. So those are the potential petition articles. So the petition article with the requisite signatures, 100 or more signatures, is an automatic placement on the ballot, I'm sorry, on the warrant. And so we would need to proceed with those.
In your list, the one thing that I thought we were going to discuss having on the warrant is some sort of funding for engineering studies at the former compost site.
Did I not put that down in there? Am I
I
right?
didn't see it.
Okay,
But-
yes, I didn't need to, yes, I meant to have that as part of the list. So this would be for geotechnical
Geotechnical.
analysis of the site, of the old compost site, to see if it is suitable for a new DPW facility. And Chuck was hoping to get those figures this week so that we can plug in a number that would be appropriate for that. So Alan has his hand up, I see, and we can also walk through the other articles that are suggested here.
Let's hear from Alan.
Thank you, Ann. Just on the petition article to require all zoning amendments to be approved at the ballot, I know Michelle will be aware of the interaction between that potential article and the special act that applies to Manchester, but depending on how it's worded, I suspect that it does fall within the terms of the special act, and therefore it's probably okay.
Thank you.
Greg, does that make sense to you?
Yes, I just, my hesitation was because of the recent changes in zoning quantum of votes, and that just raised a question in my mind if the state was, would allow that step. But yes, we have that special article, so.
Yeah, the special act in essence provides that anything that town meeting votes to put on the ballot goes to the ballot, subject to the same quantum of vote requirement that we would be required to approve it at town meeting.
Right.
So.
Yep.
I know Michelle is well aware of that, so she'll be looking at it.
So if you'd like to sort of walk through
Sure.
the possibilities here and opine as to your preferences. So we have talked about amending the general bylaw regarding parking, particularly the location of the resident sticker on the car, removing the specificity.
I think we probably want to take a large chunk of that out. I don't, including which streets are resident only or.
Yes, I have a little bit of caution there in terms of, I mean, those streets were, we have those in there so that only residents can park and you don't have beachgoers parking.
Oh, I'm not saying that we don't have, I'm suggesting that we make that a regulation.
Oh, I see.
Done by the parking clerk and the police department in concert.
Rather than having it be an
Rather
official
than having
bylaw, I see what you're saying.
a list in our bylaw.
Bylaws should be simple, high level.
Who has the authority to make
Yes,
this decision type thing.
exactly.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah, no,
that,
I understand now.
that gets most of that section moved to the discretion of the parking clerk and the,
Yeah, you may want to, well, you should think about whether or not you want to have a vote on that as a select board or not.
of course we want to have
Yes.
Could you come up with some, or someone come up with some language for that?
Yes, yeah, we have some draft language already, but we'll continue to work on that this week.
Yeah, 'cause
So yes, and then there was some no parking zones, again, if we wanted to take all of those out and make them
discretion
at
of,
the discretion of the select board or something.
you know, things change. It would be nice not
You don't wanna have to change the bylaw every single time you change a street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, I mentioned this, that you would want to seek voter authorization to enter into a long-term lease for the land that the community center resides. So any real estate transaction requires town meeting approval.
Mhm.
So that's why we need to go to the voters for that. So just, we have that on the table. Good progress being made in terms of coming together on a draft agreement, lease agreement for that building with the association of the town. So I think that's moving forward in a good direction. So the next item, potential for rescinding some of the appropriation for the ladder truck. So the new ladder truck, we had appropriated up to 1.5 million. The new truck is coming in at 1.4. So there actually is a difference of 95.
Prime-day deals.
And so one of the suggestions that Chief McNeely has, he's here to talk later this evening about call firefighters, but he can chime in here as well, is that you could reappropriate some of those dollars for the purchase of a second SUV. And that SUV could serve as a non-transport paramedic response vehicle instead of the engine, the pumper. So that has been retrofitted to be to serve as a paramedic non-transport response vehicle. Obviously, it's a much larger vehicle. It takes the pumper out of town if there's a fire and you'll be without a pumper. And it's obviously an SUV more nimble and quicker to maneuver and less wear and tear than the large vehicle.
Excuse me, your SUV is so equipped already?
Mine is not. The engine one is equipped as a.
Can we have?
So there is the Chief SUV.
Chief's SUV.
Yes.
Is not already equipped for,
So it's not.
It's not
equipped
with it. That's the
it's
idea is
BLS.
to transition that into
Okay.
being equipped.
Right.
So the request is for a second SUV, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. So, again, the chief can speak to this. I think long-term, I think the chief feels pretty strongly that a second full ambulance is something that he would be looking for down the road. The current ambulance is, I want to say, 5 years old now?
It'll be 5.
It's
and
coming up on
the lead
5.
time on a new one is, if we're lucky, 24 to 36 months, if we ordered it today. So kind of the idea behind the fly car is right now, if Essex calls for paramedic level service, we're currently sending our only ambulance out of town, where we could just send a paramedic and a fly car out of town, leave that ambulance available for our residents.
And you'd probably not like to send engine 1 out of town.
Since that's the only truck we currently have that pumps water, no.
So I don't know if you want to talk about it or hear the whole list and then go back to each one, or how do you want to proceed?
I kind of like talking about them as we go,
Sure.
but is there any more discussion of moving the non-transport paramedic gear to buying a new SUV to put the gear in, being more nimble and not taking a truck out when we need.
I think it's an excellent idea.
So just a question, so your vehicle would stay, would not be equipped, it would stay as it is?
Correct, I think the idea would, we probably outfit, my vehicle has boxes already in the back that would set up the ALS equipment in it. So that allows, like, if the ambulance is out of town and there's a second medical, when one person's driving, it's much easier for them to drive an SUV in some of these driveways we have to back in and out of
Yeah.
to avoid damage and things like that, so.
And how much is that gonna cost? Is that the 95,000 that's shown there?
It is 62, I think, and that's already, that's everything. That's lights.
Painted, detailed.
That's lights and all that.
Oh, all the bells and stuff, literally?
Already read?
Huh?
Already read?
I believe so. It all depends on supply chain. There's literally supply chain issues all across the board. You say government vehicle and they had, months to it. I think there's a couple of the lots, so it's whatever we can get.
So the special equipment that we've got, which right now is an engine 1,
Yeah.
would get transferred?
Correct. And it still allows us the ability, as, we get equipment, replace equipment and things like that, we can add resources. That equipment will stay in there. It's not a loss of equipment per se, or a loss of what we've added.
No, it's just getting transferred.
Yeah.
Further discussion of SUV, sounds as if we're willing to put that on.
Yeah, just have you confirm the number.
Yes, I put the quote in, ClearGov. It's already in on the capital items.
Okay.
So,
And we still got $30,000.
yes.
Let's have a party.
Okay.
Just did last Thursday.
So a fourth potential article, as you recall, we did not put the supplemental funds in for the fire union contract because that was still being negotiated. And there's a couple of other salary adjustments that would be helpful to have for, as we look to hire a new planner. That's been a struggle. And also, as part of our compensation study, we are further behind than I would have guessed. The last couple of years, there's been a lot of movement in salaries, and we are particularly behind in our town clerk position. So a couple of options here. We can work with the finance committee and draw on the reserve funds that they have available, or we could seek a supplemental appropriation to cover it. So I put down a figure of 20,000. That is more than enough to cover those three needs.
We don't have to make that decision really until town meeting.
You could also wait until annual town meeting.
No, what I'm saying, we don't have to decide where the funds come from in order to put it on the warrant.
Well, if you're using the current reserve funds, that's already been appropriated. So you wouldn't need an article.
You don't need a warrant article.
Okay.
So this is the,
How much in the reserve funds?
that's what I was just trying to remember. Is it 175 or 100, something like that? Yeah, it's in that
It's a
range.
FinCom reserve.
Okay, and that covers
We
12
haven't
months,
used any.
and that, you haven't used any
We haven't
yet?
used it yet, no.
How much we used last year?
We used it all.
Because from
But
the
that was part
overtime,
of the year-end adjustments.
Oh, okay, when you had money, all right, let's move some things around. Okay, so,
Right. We had overtime issues, remember?
I remember it well.
Oh,
That's coming up later.
So, I think the finance committee had discussed at least the fire contract, and they felt that taking out of the reserve is probably fine.
Yeah.
But I just give you the option.
I think it's important to hear from FinCom first, let them advise us. And, before we make a decision.
You're gonna speak for your colleagues?
Well, we have a meeting on 10/26.
Okay.
Will we be
Six.
doing, right, we were
Yeah,
doing
Wednesday.
capital?
Yep.
But we can add,
So that would mean having you meet the next day, if you wanted to wait for that. And have your special meeting on Thursday, the 27th.
No, Thursday's the 26th. Friday's the 27th.
Correct. Wednesday's
No,
the
no.
Wednesday's the
We-
25th.
Friday's the
You're
27th.
meeting
That's
Wednesday. so
Wednesday, the
You
25th.
messed things up, Sarah.
I thought it was the 25th, that's why. I-
25th.
I'm just
Yes.
looking what's in front of
Okay.
me. I can't speak for her.
So the 25th is when the finance committee meets, so
Yeah.
you can meet Thursday, the 26th to finalize. Yeah, there's a couple of items here that you may want their feedback on.
Are we penciling that in then, the 26th?
So I would pencil in either, we should discuss whether or not people are available the 26th or the 27th.
What time?
27th is a Friday?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I'd prefer the 26th.
I think the 26th.
Myself.
Morning or first of the day or end of the day?
The
End of the
26th,
day for me.
the 26th is, oh God, it's not on my calendar, it's planning practicum, and,
That's in the evening
yeah.
Yeah, and I have
at
a,
6:30.
I have a commitment in the evening also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, early evening's fine with me. This isn't a long discussion, right? We have specific
Not a long
things to deal
discussion,
with.
no. I mean, you could, I would suggest you do it at 8:30 or in the morning or at 4:30 or 5 in the evening.
Yeah,
MBTA is zoning at 10, but I guess 8:30 is not gonna run into 10.
Right. You have a task force, subcommittee meeting?
It's your preference.
Okay.
yes, good.
4:30.
All I do is show up.
So 8:30, is that not good in the morning?
Not good for you? Oh, then we gotta, if Becky says it's not good.
No, I could do 8:30.
Becky, you're not understanding me here.
Okay.
It's not
I
good
do
for
have
you,
an
Becky.
obligation at 9:30 and then but,
Becky, could you move closer to your microphone? We're having a really hard time hearing.
oh, sorry, is that any better?
No.
Not much, no.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I've got
I
it.
think I heard you say that 8:30 was better for you than later.
Yes.
And we're here for what, 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
All right.
yeah.
So 8:30 on Thursday.
Thursday, the 26th.
I can't make that at 8:30 on Thursday, the 26th, but I don't think you need me for this one either.
We always like your presence, Alan, but in terms of an essential presence, no.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Alan.
No problem.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on, another request. They're working with our consortium, IT consortium in Danvers. They are recommending some improvements, upgrades to our cybersecurity. This is based on a recent hack that happened to Middleton. And so there's some hard lessons learned there. And so they are recommending some upgrades. Andrea was hoping to have that meeting this morning with them. They had to reschedule that for later in the week, so I don't have the exact figure. But it's actually going to be probably that lower range. I said 30 to 50,000. I think it's probably going to be closer to that lower end. But that would be a supplemental request for the current budget year. Any comments there?
It'd be nice to see the whole list of things we might need to do in that arena, better
Yeah,
understand.
they do have a list that they were already scheduled to do and are doing now that we had funded. These are some additional things, but yes, I can give you that list. Next on my list to you, the potential of funding an audit of the school district's budget and operations. You recall that at the, what I call the summit meeting, the meetings of the 2 boards of select boards and the 2 finance committees. The 5 board meeting, there was consensus that an outside audit of school operations expenses would be helpful. Essex is putting this on their special town meeting, coincidentally the same night. They're feeling that if the 2 towns are funding it, then you have some more control over that. They received a quote from one firm, quite a wide range, depending on the level of detail that is desired. They said 75 to 120,000 for that, for such an audit. If it were to be split on that sort of 1/3, 2/3 approach with the 2 towns, then we could be responsible for up to 80,000 of that cost. Alternatively, it's something that you could ask the district to do on their own, or it could be a 3-way split, which is something that has been done, for example, when we did the building, the feasibility study, that was a 3-way split. So again, I think Finance Committee in the past has talked about having the school pay for this, but we haven't talked about it as a board here.
Would the finance committee suggest that the school pay for the whole thing?
I think that's what your previous conversation was, but we didn't have numbers either.
No, and I don't think it was that specific.
Yeah, it was a very general conversation. It was not
I don't think it was a definitive decision.
that's a fair way to say it.
In the spirit of partnership and us all having skin in the game to work, a very difficult issue, I kind of like the idea of a 3-way split, just, as a first pass. That's just, initial thought.
I want to be sure that when the report comes out, people don't say, well, that's because the school was directing it. That's.
Right.
And I think some of that has to be dealt with Essex, which I think has much question. It would be nice to have some idea what the scope of services are that are different between 75 and 120.
Right,
Yeah.
that's a big range.
Yeah, good
That's a big
question.
range. I can try to get more details from them, what they received.
This is an audit that would be done within this current budgeting cycle.
So you're right, this is something that is
In the next
seen
few months.
as happening in the next few months, yes.
Okay.
Yep. It was desired to have it for this budget cycle.
Mhm. I guess I can't ask Sarah what her committee thinks.
We'll have to discuss it, but the one thing the finance committee will want to know is with all of these monetary articles, we're gonna wanna know how that impacts the tax rate.
Right.
Before we, take a vote.
If we're gonna have a very short meeting to discuss the warrant, it'd be nice to get particularly the questions about this. What?
Yeah, get that to you ahead of time, for sure. Is that what you're gonna say?
Yeah, get it to us ahead of time. Yeah, I guess we can mull it over individually, but it seems like a potentially large discussion. But
We could have a portion of our meeting be joint. We were starting the capital budget on the 26th.
every night's busy.
Yeah.
Have we had an audit of the school budget before? School.
Well, they do an annual audit,
Yeah,
like we do, but in terms of a sort of an operational audit,
yes.
certainly not in recent history, no. I don't know enough to say never, but since I've been here, I'm not aware that it's been done.
Okay.
And I'm sure it was not done when I was on the school committee. Okay,
All right, so that's a question mark. And then the question about extending parking along Beach Street. So again, I think there were some conversations at the previous meetings where the thought is perhaps we can get a crosswalk near Harbor Point, and that may take up one or two parking spaces. And so therefore you'd like to recoup those lost parking spaces a little past Tappan Street, so 3 to 5 additional parking spaces there.
Are you aware it's in the general bylaw, there can't be parking east of Tappan?
Right. So it would have to.
that's why this one is going on the warrant.
So do you want to pick a number? How many new parking spaces? Or
How many would we be taking away?
the most should be taken
Taken
away.
is 2. The previous terms, 2016, 2017, there were upwards of 30 spots all the way down to Old Neck. I'd be happy with a half a dozen spots at this point.
Yeah.
I'm willing to compromise and say 10, 6 to 10. That might, and then can also, maybe that opens up some parking at Masco for more voters placards too, I don't know.
I think we shouldn't say 6 to 10.
I'm saying, pick a number, you guys decide. All right, I'm saying, I'm happy.
Let's say 10, and if we get a motion from the floor to amend it to 6.
Or whatever, yes.
But we need to at least recoup 2. And that's as public, Kathy, you were saying that both
Mike and
Ped
Ped
and DIP both said
They
that they
were
were.
fine with the crosswalk, they just didn't want to lose parking spaces, so I think as long as parking is accommodated,
Mm-hmm.
I'll confirm that, the meeting Wednesday morning.
So you wanna say 10?
That's a max. I prefer closer to 6, but, I'm gonna get a motion on the floor for me to change the 10, if that's what applies.
I don't care, I just wanna do something.
I looked at it. I see one space disappearing for sure, but those spaces are pretty big, and 2 is gonna, that's a lot of curb distance.
It doesn't happen down to us.
Almost 30
tracks.
Yeah, it's probably within 1 or 2
Worst case
spaces.
scenario,
of the
we
track.
used to, we plan on the worst case.
Those
So
are
to-
18-foot parking spaces.
That's a lot.
So that's almost 30 feet. That's a lot.
But there are also guidelines in terms of distance.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules are, like a fire
Yeah.
hydrant.
Well, it's
And the distance
also,
from a crosswalk was where parking.
Right, that's the issue, how close you park to the crosswalk.
So for clarity, do we need to put, what is it that we need the town to vote on? Is it just the parking spaces, or is it also the addition of the crosswalk?
You don't need the approval of the crosswalk, that is something you can.
Okay, so I guess what I'm suggesting is we think carefully about how we word the warrant. So for example, we could agree to add a crosswalk. That's our decision, right? And then bring forth to town meeting, this thing that we agreed to do we would lose 2 parking spaces. So the purpose of this warrant is to, not lose parking. So it's how you want to frame it, right? Because my concern is, if we don't get any additional parking spaces, do we not want to add the crosswalk? I think it's needed from a safety standpoint. So I would be
Agreed.
concerned about not getting a crosswalk if we ask for too many parking spaces and don't get them.
Well,
I agree.
If we don't get any, then we lose 2.
Well, that's what I guess what I'm proposing is that we can we?
Don't tie the crosswalk to
Yeah,
the additional.
Exactly,
spaces.
like we make a decision to do the crosswalk for safety purposes, and then when we discuss it with the town, we
So the town has said that the only thing in the warrant would be that we have the opportunity to add, I don't know, X number of 100 feet beyond, X number of feet beyond Tappan Street for
Right.
parking, period.
And
Yes,
the warrant article doesn't need to specify the number of spaces you want to add.
Just feet.
It can simply say to add a number of spaces, and then your motion on town meeting floor can specify the number.
And the
So
reason.
you have that time to figure it out.
thank you, Alan, that's
Okay.
very useful.
But do you want to provide
I
context
think you do.
I
think
want
you
to
need context.
provide context, but
in the article without tying it?
I guess the context I'm hoping we could provide is we are planning to,
Mhm.
not leave that out there as an option, not to do the crosswalk. So we are planning to put a crosswalk in this place, and as a result, the reason for this warrant is we would like to, accommodate some additional
You
parking.
you definitely need context. Otherwise people say, what are you doing?
Right, exactly. Yeah, okay. Okay, and then the last one that Ann brought up earlier was the geotechnical study for the old compost site to explore the feasibility of the land accepting the new DPW facility. And again, I'll have a dollar amount from Chuck, hopefully tomorrow or the next day.
And there may be an additional article from the planning board.
Correct, so the planning board has a public hearing on Monday, the 23rd, to discuss amending the current bylaw, which restricts the use of a carriage house, a space above a garage, to an employee. And it would remove that restriction and make it available to anybody.
Have we exhausted the warrant as a source of entertainment? Okay, then our next,
So just to
Yeah.
make sure everyone understands, so this is for Monday, November 13th.
yes,
We would start at 6:30
yes,
at the elementary school.
yes.
And you will finalize this warrant for posting at your special meeting on the 26th.
Greg, I think it would be not a bad idea to vote the date and time tonight.
Is there a motion for a date and time for a town meeting? Date, time, and location.
So it's
November 13th at the new Memorial School cafetorium.
At 6:30, so moved.
second,
Roll call vote, Mr. Solacey.
yes.
Yes.
Ann says yes.
John says yes.
Becky says yes.
She's still here.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Okay. The next item is staffing updates.
I'm going to say good night.
Thank you very much for putting up with all of this and for your useful.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Comments. Come up with the words in the later.
So staffing updates, just wanted to update you on the search for a new town planner / land use director. So unfortunately, our leading candidate that we had hoped to bring on board, we were not able to come to terms. And so we are back out on that search. We have received a few new resumes. We're having some initial conversations, pre-screenings for those candidates to see if it makes sense to continue to advance them. In the meantime, we continue to look for an interim town planner, Betsy Ware, who has been with us since last November. Had done a very nice job for us, but had to fully retire. Pressures on the home front required that. And so unfortunately, we don't have her services with us. We certainly appreciated the work that she was able to do. Various leads on interim have not panned out so far, though I do have possibility with MAPC, the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, being able to provide some minimal, but at least some support to, in the range of maybe 10 hours or so a week to at least help with applications and making sure that those are getting posted properly and reviewed. If there weren't very many applications, which often we don't have that many applications for the planning board, they could help the planning board in some of the zoning work that they're doing. So we'll continue to pursue that as a stopgap measure. In the meantime, we are bringing on board a consultant to help with the MBTA zoning efforts. The task force voted to approve moving ahead with the firm this past Thursday. And so she and her firm will be starting up very soon on that.
You signed the contract?
Haven't signed the contract, but we will do that in the next couple of days. So that,
We are anticipating the arrival of this person.
Yes,
with
yes.
great enthusiasm.
I understand, yeah, and so I think it's a good choice. She certainly has very strong credentials, has been helping out a number of other communities with MBTA zoning, and actually was intimately involved with developing the compliance tool that we need to use for the state. So she certainly knows that program inside and out.
Excellent.
And it'll be a very useful tool for the task force as you sort of test run various scenarios. So that's good news. New conservation agent started up today. We have an overlap with retiring Chris Bertoni for this week, so we have a little bit of a transition there. And we are sharing a new person with Hamilton in their new IMA, new intermunicipal agreement. So that's underway. So I want to just review those with you on the status. So again, we re-advertise, and if anyone knows of anyone who would be a strong candidate for a planner, I would love to hear about them.
Any other sessions? Okay, the next discussion item is the Booster Club Carnival. And
so I think, as you know, the vendor who is setting up and will be operating the carnival has requested that they be allowed to have staff sleep overnight on the grounds in trailers that they provide. Originally, your approval, the request was that would not be happening. So they did have to change vendors. The original vendor double booked, but luckily has provided this an alternative vendor who actually has very good credentials, references were checked, and no black marks on the state level and all of that good stuff. So it would be appropriate, if you're in agreement, to vote to amend your original permission to allow staff to stay overnight on the grounds.
for the sake of the recording, Has this been taken up with the police chief?
Yeah, so there was a staff meeting last week. Brian was helpful in organizing that. And yes, police and fire and DPW and public health have all basically signed off on approval for allowing this. The chief does reserve the option of requiring an overnight detail if he feels that it becomes necessary. But yes, they are in agreement with it. And,
They have a curfew at
11 o'clock, yes.
Where are they gonna find anything to eat after
They
10
were
o'clock?
gonna find it after 10 o'clock, but it was.
The 10 o'clock was the original, but I
It
think,
was originally was 10, and then they're probably not gonna finish up until 10. They're gonna find real soon that there's nothing open after 10 anyway, but.
it allows them to run some,
They gotta go out of town. to
yeah, they
buy
gotta
some
go out of
food.
town, it gives them an hour to do
It
that.
takes a little time.
Even the new roast beef joint is closing at 9, so.
Okay, I think, is there anything else that we need to? Okay. Is there a movement to amend our previous permission to allow crew to sleep on-site with an 11 o'clock curfew and the possibility of a
Overnight police detail.
police detail?
So moved.
Second.
Ready to vote? Brian?
Yes.
Kathy? Anne says yes.
John, yes?
Becky?
Yes.
Okay. And finally, we get,
So the third topic is the fire department call force. Chief McNeely is here, he can review the efforts to date.
Can you give me a sharing ability on Zoom, just so I can share the PowerPoint?
Do I have that electronically? Do you, oh,
I can just,
do you want?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, let me give you permission to do that, yeah, absolutely. There you are, sorry. Co-host, all right, yes. Okay, there you go.
So as you know, we did a month-long initiative to try to get call firefighters. I'm sure you looked at your meeting packets already and kind of looked at the meat and potatoes of our presentation. It actually ended up with 14 candidates, which was more than I thought we were gonna get, so I was happy with that. During the whole month of September, we put it in the Cricket. You might have seen the signboards when you went through town, as well as our social media posts, which all had good results. Of the 14 applicants, we had 5 that were firefighters already certified to the 1-2. 3 of the applicants were EMTs, 1 was a paramedic, and 3 were previous Manchester call firefighters. 7 applicants of the 14 live within a reasonable response range. So Greg and I had talked, and we initially had, I think, 10 minutes from the house to the station. And Greg brought up that you can live in Manchester and not be within 10 minutes of the fire station, so we moved that out to 15. So we had applicants from Salem, Woburn, a couple from Rockport. So if we narrowed it down to what would actually be beneficial to the town, we're down to 7. And this is all prior to doing any type of interviews, et cetera, and vetting the candidates that put in for us. I did a little research.
I have a question about it, if I could just ask. So, you looked at where these people live. What about where they work?
So that was not on the application. During some, about 4 work in Boston, 1 works remote. So it doesn't seem to be, I know 1 works in locally, landscaping, contracting, that type of thing.
The reason for my question is, I know in Carlisle, where my brother lives, I guess they have a call force and they provide workspace for those people who work remotely. They provide it in the firehouse. So what he told me, or in one of the town buildings next to the firehouse.
Okay.
So just another creative option, I thought I'd throw it out there if you hadn't,
I know some of the schools do like live-in students and things like that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
another
that kind
one.
of thing.
But yeah, so that's something we'd have to dive into when we do vetting process,
Okay.
Going forward where they work, because if they work out of town, they work in Boston, that limits their availability, to us.
All right, so as a follow-up to that, it could be maybe some of the other candidates that don't live so close, but work close.
Or
Yeah.
could work remotely from a
Yes,
place that we.
so you really have to kind of look at
Yeah, absolutely.
all
There's a variety
14
of different,
and see what the story is. This
Yeah.
is just their
this is a
home
great-
arrangement.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I dove a little bit further, I wanted to get into some of the meat and potatoes of our surrounding communities with their call force to see what they're actually getting from their call force. So these aren't like-sized communities, these are just people around Manchester. So Essex currently on staff has 45 call firefighters. 11 respond to 20% of the calls or more, so that's 24% of the staffing. Hamilton has 33, only 8 respond to 20% or more of the calls, and that's where the 20% comes from. That's usually the benchmark that we say, is this a cost-benefit analysis to have this person here? They can respond to at least 20% of our request for service. One of them has 27 call firefighters, 12 respond to 20% or more.
Question about calls.
Yep.
Most of your calls are ambulance.
About 79% and change.
That more or less counts as.
Yep.
Would you be expecting call firefighters to respond to ambulance calls?
So not the initial ambulance call, where we need help is subsequent calls. So we'll have simultaneous calls and we need people to come back. So it's not necessarily that first call, it's that second call where we run it then.
So I don't see how I'm going to get that information from these numbers.
So you're not, you're gonna get participation rates, and to be, fair, every town's call volumes and the requests on the call department is different. So Essex, all calls require a response from the call department. Where Topsfield is very much like us, Middleton is very much like us, where we can handle the first calls on it's not significant in nature with the on-duty staff.
Yeah, so I guess to that point, I don't know for each of these communities where there are full-time people.
Yeah.
And that has to affect things, because then call becomes, I won't call it, well, maybe I do call it second tier. If you've got people that are covering the call that comes in, you're not gonna go and chase down the call folks.
Correct, so, and that can be a double-edged sword, if you will, where they're not coming to every call, because you have to keep the call firefighters entertained. They have to get experience by doing calls, and then if you overwork them, then they don't wanna come in either. So it's a kind of a happy medium depending on, how we utilize them and, which way we go about it. And I've been on both ends of it, being a call firefighter my entire life. It's, all weekend long, nonstop, they're like, all right, I need a break, I'm not going back. Versus, okay, I haven't done anything in a couple weeks, when's the next call I'm gonna hit? But I just wanted to get the idea. I would say the towns that are very similar to us is the makeup, Middleton would be the closest, followed by Topsfield and Hamilton. Those 3 communities have full-time staff. Middleton and Topsfield both have 24-hour staff. Hamilton staffs during the day. And then obviously Ipswich has full-time staff as well, and they're very similar to us. So, you look at the percentages, and I'm just trying to look at a cost-benefit ratio of, what to expect out of our call firefighters forecasted based upon what we've seen historically. So what's it gonna cost to upfit these? So if we did the 7 firefighters, turnout gears, 34,000, firefighter 1 and 2 training, which 4 of them would need, we'll round up to 30,000. First responder training, which is a state mandate for any public safety, 4 of them would need, which is 2,300, and then in-house training, driving the fire trucks, operating our trucks, policies and procedures, things like that. We're looking at a startup cost about $72,000 before they kind of even hit the street. That doesn't include if there's any overtime to bring. I can do some of the training, but there's other people that are more knowledgeable in different areas than I am and can articulate it better, so there'd be a little bit of overtime cost depending on who's doing the education for the in-house training. So the reason I brought all these numbers up is I am willing to go whichever way you guys direct me. When I look at the numbers and, forecasting it out for Manchester, if we're optimistic and we say we're gonna be a little bit better than the average and we're gonna get a 30% participation rate, that means we're gonna get 2 call firefighters 20% of the time. Now, is that worth it? I don't know. I look at it, I've looked for a couple of things. Does having a call fire department put us in a different tier for getting grants? It does and it doesn't. In some aspects it hurts us, some aspects it helps us. There's been some talk about, putting on a day deputy to help with fire prevention with cell signaling and everything else going on in town. And, I know funding is tight, and that might be something that was cut. Is it worth reallocating those funds to have one person 60% of the time, or based upon our calls, 60% of our emergency responses happen during the day, and 60 of them happen Tuesday through Friday, which would be a potential shift that person would work. So I'm just presenting these ideas to you guys to kind of get an idea of which way you'd like me to head.
I kind of, you're comparing somebody who's full-time, multi-year, with the startup costs.
Correct, yeah, absolutely. So I just don't know if we're gonna get a cost benefit of the startup of the call department. I guess I'm trying to, have a discussion with you guys, see what you think, which way you'd like us to kind of lean and go.
I'm just trying to figure out, I'm not sure what questions I'm supposed to ask. There's a lot of stuff here.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you talked about the people who were within the distance, the appropriate distance,
Yeah.
that was 7 of them?
7, yeah.
How many of those were already trained firefighters, or were none of them?
2 were trained firefighters.
Okay,
One of those was a firefighter paramedic.
okay,
One's a firefighter, and one's an EMT, but not a firefighter.
okay. So I think that was the grant, so if you wanted to start with the people who are already ready.
Yeah, so that's 7, the dollar figure I brought up here,
Yeah,
that is based upon those 7. So
Right.
3 were firefighters, 3 had some type of EMS training.
right. So my question is, in order to start up the program to see if we can make it successful,
Yeah.
would we need to start with all 7, or could you start with fewer than that?
So
And I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking the
Yeah,
question.
so I don't know, I think first we have to vet them, we don't know
Right.
all 7. We're gonna vet all the way through, and then if we lower those numbers, are those percentages going to change that we just correlated
Right, that's what
through
I'm
those?
asking, yeah.
So that's one of those things, I hate to throw good money away if we can use it for a different purpose, that's.
So does this money that is being spent reduce what we're spending in other areas, or does it just improve our responsiveness?
I mean, I wanna be careful with my words.
All right.
It's gonna be an additional cost, and it's gonna improve our responsiveness 20% of the time, based upon forecasted numbers.
Will it decrease over time?
I will have
That's,
no,
the key
it'll have no effect on the overtime. Yeah. And if you've seen the monthly report, the overtime, once we hit December, it should be all the way down. It's trending significantly down, but once we get that last person through.
I guess the question, are we looking for numbers too, okay?
What do you mean numbers? Dollars?
No, are we looking for numbers as far as bodies go, people? Or can we get better bang for our buck by having a deputy who can take on more responsibility as far as fire prevention goes during the day? There'll be an overlap as far as time goes. And then the other question is, what does the rank and file think?
So the rank and file are, they will do either one. I will tell you that morale has drastically increased. We are on an awesome trajectory. So they'll work with anything that we give them. I think, in my personal opinion, I think the money's better spent in a day deputy, especially, we're sharing conservation individuals. We might have a potential of sharing that cost with another community as well going forward. Obviously, that's an initial thought process. Just something to kind of think about, going forward with shared services.
Would you like input from the FinCom?
Yes,
The FinCom did not support hiring a deputy chief in this upcoming fiscal year because of the number of new firefighters been brought on, and the finance committee is very much for trying to call firefighter force. It's been a hot spot for a long time. And it's a one-time cost where, rather than a deputy chief would be more than that each
Every
year, including benefits, yeah. Not to say FinCom wouldn't consider it in a subsequent year, but we just felt as a new chief, you know, a lot of new people that you really need to figure out whether you really need it.
I do think that the call will have ongoing cost. I don't think it's just a
no,
one-time story.
but the big
It's
cost.
not $71,000 a year.
The big cost is in the training and outfitting,
Right.
and they don't need that.
Yeah, ongoing costs, I'd say
But
about
you'll-
50% of that.
You will always lose, there'll always be attrition here.
Yes.
There's gonna be a cycle. Now, you
Right.
probably won't be 7 every year, but it could be 3 every year.
And is there some annual training that they're a refresher deal that they have to go through?
Yeah, so medical-wise, there's a refresher training. Fire-wise, typically there's at least a month or a bi-monthly training they have to attend, 2 to 4 hours, depending on the topic. And the other thing that kind of, I didn't mention here, is you look at the national trend. The national trend is, you know, it's kind of a downward slope. So, you know, like I said, I'm willing to do wherever you direct me to go, I'm willing to go. I just, you know, my personal opinion is probably not in the long term. We might be able to get these 7 people on board, but if we look at the history of the call departments here, the participation rate was well below 20%. It was sub 10% based
Yeah,
on the
but
numbers.
as you say, mostly it's 80% ambulance calls, for which you wouldn't need them unless you needed somebody to stay in the station because you had a second call.
So we need people to go on that second call. That's it's not, we can't cover 2 calls ourselves. We can cover the first call. They're our primary response to the second call, which has been happening more frequently as well.
I was going to ask, how often do you have 2 overlapping calls?
So this is what, October, so September we had 11 or 12 overlapping calls. So it's not a rare occurrence by any stretch of the imagination.
How do you handle them now?
Fingers crossed. So it depends on what the call is. We have mutual aid that comes in. Sometimes there's a delay. For instance, there was a medical the other morning on Pleasant Street, which I was coming from Essex. Our ambulance was coming from, I think, Rockport. I lost a line. So it's just getting the people there.
That will improve when you have the full.
So we had 3 on duty, but the call that we had prior took all 3. It was a critical call. So it all if there was 4 on, that would give you 1. So yes,
4 on doesn't give you 2 and 2.
it depends if it's
Depends
a
on the
cardiac arrest, a really sick person that requires 2 people to care for the patient, 1 person drive. That still brings us down to 1. Those are thankfully for everybody not very prevalent.
Do you engage, call people when there's already one first call going out, or do you wait just because there may not be a second call that comes in, but you don't know?
So it depends on that first call. So typically, if it's a rollover on the highway, we'd call people right away. If it was a commercial fire alarm or like the high school, a school, something that has a high risk elderly housing, those would all involve the call right away. Where you know, if it's a residential smoke detector going off from cooking, we wouldn't bring in the call force for that.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in what Kathy said. Why do you have to go to 7 right away? Because I think there'd be a point of diminishing returns when you say, I mean, only a certain percentage of these people actually respond 20% of the time, or whatever it was.
Right.
So
I guess it'd be, you know, playing the lottery and picking the right ones.
Well,
because they can respond.
What would be the cost of doing a further screening and coming back to talk to us again?
I mean, there'd be no, can you elaborate a little bit on
Yeah,
further screening?
you've said you've just received these applications.
Haven't done any
Oh,
vetting yet.
so vetting, an interview process, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there would be no costs.
No hard cost.
No, yeah.
You know,
I'm actually thinking, would these people be terribly disappointed if you called them in and talked to them and then we decided not to do it? Or is that just the way life goes?
Sorry.
I would like to know how many of
I'm
those
sorry if you have
seven
to
are
hurt someone's
actually
feelings.
reasonable candidates.
Okay. And that's tough to tell too. I've had people I've worked with that would be terrible on paper and they're awesome. And they show up all the time, you have people like, oh, this person's gonna be amazing, you're like, maybe they turned out not so hot. So we certainly can vet them, that's absolutely a possibility.
Anne, if I may?
Of course, Becky.
I agree with what Brian said. Do we have numbers for, a deputy as well? Could we get that information for comparison?
I can get them from, Hamilton just added a deputy spot, we get that either from the town administrator or.
yeah, I mean, your rough figures all in, they're gonna be 100 to 120.
And I think
Per
in
year.
terms of transitioning, I think it's one of the aspects that we need to take into consideration. Does that make sense? Can you hear me?
Jake's a young guy.
I am a young guy. However, my wife's getting a little angry at me doing 3 hours of work when I get home.
No, and we've been talking about getting deputies or assistants lined up in a number of areas. Anyway, I just would like that information.
Hey, Ann, this is Tom Parkins. Can I wade in here a little bit?
Oh,
He's Finance Committee.
Finance Committee.
He's the fire department liaison.
okay, yes,
Yeah.
please.
So the chief and I were talking a little bit about the SAFER grant and how that might work into this whole process. So, maybe hiring through the SAFER grant, I know it's the whole 3-1 arm kind of concept. But if we're hiring somebody as a firefighter, the chief might have the ability to elevate somebody within the staff currently to that deputy position. And we're looking down 3 years down the road. So I don't know if the chief wanted to wade into that conversation or not.
Yeah, so the SAFER grant, I know you kind of were hammered with the 2 in, 2 out rule for a probably better part of 2.5 years. However, where we currently lay, our 4 working groups all have 4 firefighters assigned. We will drop to 3 because of a vacation, personal day, sick day, etc. So we do drop below that. If we did apply for a SAFER grant, which would basically, if we applied for 4 people, we would be it would be 4 groups of 5, so we'd be guaranteed that 2 in, 2 out 100% of the time, which actually throws us up to the higher end of that SAFER grant. With that SAFER grant, a couple things we know. We know we're gonna lose 2, just based upon retirements over, by the time the SAFER grant even kicked in, it would be close to 2026. So we're gonna lose 2 already through attrition. Historically, we'll lose 1 other going somewhere else, and then if you play the deputy into it, that would absolve those 4 people. And the way the SAFER grant works now, you used to have some ownership starting year 1, and it would kind of titrate up to year 3. Now they cover the first 3-4 years of costs, and then we take over. But there's no responsibility to cover those costs going forward after the 3 years. So if those people, if we have 3 to 4 people attrition out, or 1 becomes a deputy and 3 attrition out, then that has solidified that kind of SAFER grant. So that's another thing to talk about.
What's the cycle of a SAFER grant?
3 years.
Okay, are there entry dates? When do you have?
So normally it's right around now. They pushed it. I think they were worried about the federal shutdown, so they pushed it to January. Application date, my guess is the awards would probably start in June or July at the earliest, probably a little later, probably this time next year.
Doesn't hurt to.
Let me just make sure I followed most of this. The idea is that we would we might apply for a SAFER grant, which would give us 4 additional firefighters, bringing us to 5 for each group.
Before anyone was moved into different positions.
And you hope that by the end of 3 years,
Couple of guys go away.
So I don't hope.
3 people will go away and one of them will be a deputy chief. And bringing us back to 4.
The following of that, my look at this is that once we've had that many firefighters, the town's not gonna wanna drop down. I can't see the population all of
I
a
have
sudden.
never heard of anyone suggesting that we should have fewer firefighters, except the
That's what I'm
finance
saying,
committee.
that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying if we end up with that SAFER grant with 20 firefighters, and then as Chief says, we're gonna start to rotate, we're gonna start to retire out, we're gonna be looking to replace them.
So if we want to get into a larger discussion, which you probably do not want to do, you know, kind of my philosophy on this, if I had a crystal ball and, you know, I got all my wishes and I won the Powerball, actually I wouldn't be sitting here. I had all my wishes, is we would do that SAFER grant, and then by having a 3-year trial period, now we can say, hey, in that 3-year period, if we provide paramedic service to Essex or Hamilton or Wenham, what's the revenue stream that comes in? Does that offset those, to your point, going forward? Instead of having to fund a trial, this is also now gives us a free trial. That was the other part of that thought process, if we went that route. So, I know we've kind of olive branched out into a few different.
I think I have heard more than I can assimilate right now. And with the permission of the rest of the board, I'm going to suggest that you do some more qualifying of the 7 people. And maybe look to see if any of the outside work in the, but.
Sure, I mean, that certainly is part of the vetting process, because we can, you know, have an interview with them, find out, you know, where they work local, or they
And
just.
then we have, I understand that nobody is very good at hiring. I have made some terrible hiring mistakes in my life. And we don't expect you to be perfect, but I'd like to have your opinion of these people before we make a decision in which direction.
Yeah,
we go.
I think it's important to understand why they want to be a call firefighter, right?
Here, in particular.
Well, why they want to be one, period, if they're not one already. I didn't ask if any of the 7 are already.
So 3
call.
were.
I know they're firefighters.
Well, 3 were called firefighters here prior.
Oh, that's right.
1 is a full-time firefighter that resides in town but works elsewhere.
Okay, so for example, the 3 that used to be call firefighters, how well did they do, right?
Sure.
You know, and for those that aren't, what makes them think they want to be?
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
so to Ann's point, I like Ann's suggestion about let's take this one step at a time and before we make any big decisions.
Sounds good.
That's just my
Thank you
thought.
very much. It
You're
was a
welcome.
really very interesting.
Yeah, and the data's very helpful too. Thank
You've given
you.
us a lot to think about.
And no 2 in, 2 out.
Oh, I had to slip it in there, I was hesitant to do it, but.
Becky, do you have anything to add?
Other than what I asked before, nope. Thank you very much, Chief.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Right. We
All right.
now have a quarterly review of the town administrator. Thank you, Sarah, it was very useful having you
You're
here.
welcome. Don't be insulted that I'm not staying for the rest.
I walk out with it, I could.
Just a few highlights for the last few months. Certainly staffing issues and hiring been front and center. Unfortunately, as I indicated earlier, the person we had hoped to bring on board for the planner did not accept. I've been working with the MBTA task force, getting it up and running, and putting more time into that, given the lack of a full-time planner. Certainly the budget process for next fiscal year is underway, and continuing the work on the governance project. The work on the community center is a bit of a curveball that we've responded to, but that's progressing, I think, and also making good progress on the discussions with the Masons. So those are some of the highlights in the last few months, last quarter. And then looking ahead, obviously we have the special town meeting right around the corner here. That'll be front and center. Mentions the cybersecurity is an important priority, making sure we are doing all that we can there.
Right. When, could you send the information on the site?
Yes.
Kathy asked for it specifically, but.
Yeah, I'll give you all. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
sure.
all. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, happy to have your input on that as well. Police union negotiations will be starting up soon. They are their current contract will expire this coming June, so they are off cycle from the others based on the last agreement that we had put together. And then I mentioned the compensation study. I just received the draft the other day. We'll put that into its final form and we can share that with you. But it does look like we could benefit from looking at some new approaches to the compensation that we provide for department heads. Both not only in total amounts, but just how the ranges that we might set and some incentives that we might build into that.
So is it anticipated that as part of the compensation adjustments you're gonna look at, you would be making the ranges more transparent than they are? Like some organizations actually publish the ranges.
Right.
And was that your thinking, or?
Yes, it was. We don't really have ranges, formal ranges now.
Oh, okay, so we don't have any right now, okay.
It's really,
So the reason I keep asking about that is I just caution us making sure that we're taking the steps in the right order. When you start talking about perhaps making compensation more transparent, which is a good thing, right? There are prerequisites you want to make sure you have in place. So if you start, for example, if you start publishing ranges, people are going to ask, well, why am I in the first quartile and not the fourth quartile?
Sure.
And you have to have a performance management approach in place to be able to answer those questions well. So I'm hearing a lot about the compensation study, which is good, really good. I just don't feel.
that other piece.
Yeah, the prerequisites all have to be in place, otherwise it could wind up really backfiring badly.
And we've just started those conversations.
Okay,
So
good.
the first step was just to collect the data.
Okay, good.
And now that we have the data, just to sit down with the consultants and really walk through some of those issues that you just identified. And happy to have your, happy to have some of your input on that.
That's awesome.
And then lastly, just my note about some succession planning. So we do have some internal staff who might be interested in filling my position when I retire. And so we're working on getting them to some training and again, having them work with me on various projects to have them get a taste of that and some training. So happy to talk about whatever you think could use improvement and some goals that you would like to see, etc.
I really appreciate the way you engaged so quickly on the community center. I think that was really important, that was starting to, from a communication standpoint, getting out of control. And I just think the way you jumped in there, it was just fantastic. And also the work you've been doing with mine on the Masons and everything, I think that's really excellent work. Happy to see the progress on the succession planning, so that's terrific. And on the cyber, you know, I'm glad we're finally, you know, kind of starting to dig in there a little bit, because that was identified as a risk, and so that's really good to see that happening too. Just off a tangent on that, I hope we're going back to the IT supplier out of Danvers, right? They should be doing stuff for us. And do we understand the contract and what they should be doing for us? And are we holding them accountable for doing what they're supposed to be doing? So if you'd like any help with that, just let me know. But they are your contractor, they should be, we shouldn't be doing anything around cyber independent of them, and I know we're not, but they should be doing certain things as well.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I mean, I would reiterate everything certainly that Kathy says. In particular, I know that you're probably taking on a greater onus with regard to the MBTA task force because we're down a planner. But that's also leaning into your wheelhouse, at least, I think, from history, from where you came
From
from.
where I came from, yes.
So,
Been a few years, but
so
yes.
we're lucky, I guess, in that respect, and that we have some of your past experience to draw on. But I just look at all of the various balls that you've got in the air here, and you're pushing them along in a very responsive and timely basis. So I think we're all fortunate to have you.
I got nothing more. I think that, I don't understand how you do it.
The days are full.
I don't have to understand how you do it, as long
That's
as
the
it gets
point,
done.
yes.
No, I think it's like a well-oiled machine here.
Anne,
Becky?
Oh, she's here again.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Sometimes.
Okay, I agree with what everybody said, and I know I've said it before, but I can't say it enough. I think our town is very fortunate to have Greg Fetterspiel. And I'm also very glad to hear that you are sharing some of your work with a couple of the potential people who might be interested or involving them in your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Basically, I agree with everybody. No, I'm intrigued that there are 3 people who work here who think they might be able to step into your shoes.
And the
Maybe all
team.
3 together.
We do have some very good people.
You have
We
an
do have
excellent team.
some-
You have an
we
excellent
some very strong folks, and,
And I'm glad to see that you're asking them to get training ahead of time. Because the one thing that would make me quit is having a brand-new town manager, town administrator, with no clue what's going on. So, yes, making them show not just a desire for promotion, but a willingness to do the work to deserve the promotion is really good.
You're preparing them to compete, and that's all you can do. That's all you can do from a succession planning standpoint.
yeah. And, well,
And
in the coming months, you should see some of that.
And I've noticed some tendency for you to answer difficult emails more frequently than you had in the past. And I appreciate that.
Most of the time. I do get behind. I mean, folks have a strategy of dealing with emails. My inbox is 100+ emails a day.
Yeah.
And,
Take advantage of some of the Microsoft filtering. to automatically filter stuff into folders and leverage Debbie to help you with some of that.
So that, I'm not doing that, so.
It's a big time saver. I used to have with my assistant, her name was Sue, a Sue folder, so certain things I would, just the software would automatically route to Sue's folder, and we had a system between the two of us, we kind of talked through it, and it's a huge time saver.
Debbie folder.
Yeah, you need a Debbie.
Debbie may not like that after a while, but we'll work that out. Debbie's been a great help.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
But take advantage of the capabilities you got, and that will make, same for you, it can make your life easier too. Filter out a bunch of stuff, you don't even need to see it all. Like, I get some vendor stuff coming to me through my Manchester email, I don't know if you guys get that.
Yep, a little bit.
Yeah,
But like when I was in the working world, I would get like 100 of those a day.
Yeah.
Just stuff I didn't need to see, and so you can figure out the keywords, automate it, and gets the clutter out.
Kathy, do you hire out?
I'm sure Debbie knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, so
All right, thank you.
kudos all around. We're very lucky, the town is very lucky to have you, and we know it.
No, thank you. There are challenges for sure. So we've got a good team, and I appreciate all of the work and the time and energy that you folks put in. So at least I get a paycheck at the end of the day.
Are there liaison updates?
I did speak with Cheryl today.
Yep.
Big thing with the town workforce, and she's been saying the communication has been phenomenal with this new vendor versus the previous vendor.
Blessing in disguise, maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome.
It's gonna, and this new vendor, he was here, they're gonna be on site, there's always gonna be someone, one of the owners will be on site at night. Okay. We heard pickleball is moving right along, okay, and.
Okay.
Well, in that regard, they're still waiting to, nothing's really changed since last we spoke.
Unfortunately, we haven't heard from the association.
National.
So that's disappointing.
What Kim had to say, but it's disappointing, okay, and I think that, I think we were shooting for have something for the end of this year, but it's getting, the year is getting shorter and shorter and shorter, the days are getting shorter and shorter. And then there was just, and Pine Street, other than a couple of leaflets, is doing really well. So, yeah, I got, Rex, good, they're cranking up for the winter season basketball, and that's, their after-school program's going very well. So, a lot of command.
I have no liaison updates.
The school committee meets tomorrow.
Always an adventure.
Always an yes, indeed. John?
I will put this in the liaison category. The Boston Post came, and I think you all got an email that Gordon wasn't feeling so well. And I got an email at 5 o'clock this afternoon that he's well enough, and he's identified a time for, say, noon on Wednesday. Because he's 100 years old, I'm not gonna say, well, how about this or how about that? It's noon on Wednesday. How many folks can make that?
I babysit on Wednesday.
I work on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
I told them late in the afternoon was better. And I will come back with something, but I'll, if noon is what they want, and they said the caregiver would be there.
I am non-contagious, and I should be available, I am available on Wednesday. Just
20 minutes.
Shoot me the address.
I will. I will send it to everybody. It's gonna be at the museum.
Oh, it
Because,
is.
because that's where the Boston Post cane is
Okay.
held.
Okay.
And they've had a tough time getting it back when they've given it to people. So now it's not legal.
Okay.
All right, so I will let
Sorry.
them know that that will
And what
work.
about
Yes,
Becky?
how about you, Becky?
I'm just gonna say, I'm sorry to say I won't be able to make that.
Okay.
I really wish that I could, but I'm not able to, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Like she's
all right,
saying.
so just taking a survey.
I will be unable to attend.
It's lunchtime. You're away, a little ways away. Okay, that's the only thing I'm gonna touch on.
Okay.
Fine.
Oh, let's see. On the consent agenda, I would like to take out Article number C, which is the Parks and Rec appointment. Can we vote to approve the minutes and Halloween trick or treating is one thing?
So moved.
Second,
Oh, Brian,
yes.
Becky,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
Ann says yes.
John says yes.
And on the Parks and Rec Committee appointment, we have a policy on appointments that says that we interview people ourselves. And
Did it get posted? Thought we were gonna be, if there was an opening, we were supposed to post the opening and give people, was it 2 weeks to apply
No, there were
or
two
something?
applicants, so
Did we do an open posting?
I can't
didn't-
speak to that.
I don't think we did.
Sean Masterson is on.
Right.
I was just asking Greg if there was an open posting, because
Right.
I thought there was, but, you didn't announce it. I'll have to double check. I'm not-
yeah, 'cause I don't recall seeing it on social media, and I know Tiffany has been doing that. When there's an open posting, I usually see it on one of the social media feeds, and I just don't recall seeing that one.
so I think, unless we want to get into policies again, we have a policy that
Yep.
says the way
Yep.
appointments are made, and I suggest we follow it.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
agreed. Agreed.
So
So that's fine, we can,
we'd like to invite both candidates. No, I think we need to post.
First, verify that there was an open post. If not, then we should open
right, so that
post.
can happen over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then we come, in our meeting 2 weeks from now,
3 weeks from now.
or 3 weeks from now, whatever, yep.
Yeah, so it'd be appropriate for you to, just to cover our bases, to announce the vacancy.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and if anyone else applies, then we would
no, we'll go
take
from
them
there.
into consideration as well,
And I'm going to say one thing more about this. And one of the reasons that the select board does these interviews is that committees tend to become
insular.
insular.
Yeah.
And I think having an outside pair of eyes, several pairs of eyes, will keep committees from being self-reinforcing.
So are we asking,
We're asking Mr. Masterson and the other candidate to be prepared to talk to us at our next regular meeting, which is November something. or other.
November 2nd.
November 2nd.
with our appreciation for having waited?
Appreciation for their having volunteered, but we have this onerous process.
Right.
November 2nd?
No, it's not.
No,
That's not right. That's
I'm sorry, that's not right, 6th,
Sixth?
November
Sixth.
6th.
Yeah.
Keep it a calendar.
Oh, it's a five Monday month.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, November 6th. Oh, it was October 2nd, that's why.
That's right.
Right. Okay. I think we are at item 9, which is A.
Yes,
Is there anything we need to look at on the action items? Which I forgot completely.
Just looked like some of the dates were a little off, and didn't see, I think the only thing I didn't see was we're supposed to add the action for coming back on the water rate discussion, was that here?
Proposed new water
Like
rates.
yeah.
Yeah, that's, 11.6.
11, 6, draft. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see the word water in there, got it, yep.
Okay.
Where are we with the candidates from 2 weeks ago that were not here?
Yeah, I think we're struggling to get them
Yeah.
scheduled.
We're struggling? Okay.
Well, one backed out.
Oh, that's right, one
One
did,
backed out, and I
okay.
haven't heard back from the other one, I can't remember
Alright.
the name, but. Yeah, I've reached out a couple times.
All right.
Well, I think twice is enough.
Okay, town administrators report?
Yeah, so if, we already talked about the community center, so, like I say, I think we're making some good progress there. Well regulations, the Board of Health is still working on possible new regulations for all wells. And one of the issues would be whether or not irrigation wells are gonna be required to have tested for potential contaminants. So that is something that would be new for folks, and
Irrigation lines?
could well be some pushback from well
What other,
owners.
what other towns do that?
There are some, I don't know numbers.
Maybe in environmentally sensitive areas perhaps? Or-
Yeah, so the issue of PFAS has brought this, is making it more of an issue these days.
It's a little bit much for me.
So I
It's
hear
an
you.
expensive asset.
It's, and it's expensive.
Yeah,
Those-
that testing is expensive.
Those tests are not cheap.
You're not looking at sodium.
And they're not easy.
They're not easy. They're not easy. You really have to have a professional firm to come in to do it right. So that's gonna be an issue. So,
I think they had a clause about not using irrigation wells during a drought. Did they drop that?
So they're still reviewing it, and at their next meeting, they're gonna go through it one more time before they say this is what we wanna propose. So I don't know the status of that.
That would kind of undercut our effort to move irrigation
Right.
off of treated water.
Yes, I agree.
And are they aware of the maps of the watersheds?
In relationship to these wells.
Yeah, relationship to wells.
Yep. So that'll be working its way through. At the next Board of Health meeting a couple weeks from now, they'll be reviewing it, and then a couple weeks after that, I think is when they hope to hold a public hearing.
Mhm.
I think it'd be helpful if they came in to present to you prior to the public hearing. So I would like to try to get that scheduled.
Mhm.
So that might be on the 6th, we'll have to see how the timing works out. So moving on to the topic, some trees along 127. These are under state highway department. And so some residents reached out to Sanitar, Sanitar's office reached out to me and would like to add your voice to the request. There's some dead trees, basically from near the overpass, railroad overpass, out, then going east towards Hickory Hill. There's a few dead trees along the road that people are concerned about, dropping dead branches and whatnot. So if you're amenable, I could certainly send an email to the senator's office that you would endorse that effort.
I'm amenable.
certainly
Preserving
fine with
dead
dead
trees, yeah.
trees being removed, yeah, no.
I think, yes.
Maybe you can staff that out.
Put a sign on it, hold a hearing. Yes. Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, we already talked about the MBTA task force in terms of the consultant coming on. They had a good session on Saturday. A very good turnout, good questions, good back and forth all around, I thought. So we'll continue to try to move that along. And then if your schedule allows, the students from MIT will be coming to the task force meeting on the 26th, that evening.
Tied up the 26th.
In the morning.
In the morning, we'll have a meeting, and then, so this will be a preliminary presentation, and then they will make a final presentation at the end of the semester in early December. So they're looking for some feedback on some of their initial ideas. It's a design studio class, basically, and they'll be giving some suggestions as to what they think might fit in with the character of the town, and maybe some good guidance for some design standards that we might want to incorporate. So that's coming up. Oh, that's what I have.
I've run out of agenda.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Ann says yes.
Yes.
And Becky?
She's
I
gonna check
I think we might have lost her at the end.
Oh.
Yeah, it looks like we did.
It's happy hour wherever she is.
9:05, very, very well.
Yeah.